Okay, I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024 City Council of the City of East Lansing Special Budget Work Session meeting. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Altman.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows. Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Here.
Mayor Brookover.
Here. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Communication from the audience. Dr. Knapp.
Sarah Knapp. I live at 952 Roxburgh.
Might want to get a little closer to the mic, sir.
Okay. Sarah Knapp. I live at 952 Roxburgh Avenue, and I am here to talk with you about the properties on Lake Lansing Road, properties 210, 218, and 224. It was an agenda item at your last meeting, and we put off decision-making until June. And I am here today to ask for your consideration and moving that up to your May 14th meeting, and I would like to explain why. I'm frustrated with this process. This is the, you may not know this, but this is the third buyer that we have brought forward to the city, and along with us taking about a year to rezone the property, or a little over, because we got caught in all of COVID. So we have done on this round, like the others, we have done everything that has been asked, and in a timely fashion, including this last traffic study that we had to get into you 3 weeks before we could get on a meeting schedule, and the intention of that is for you to have the opportunity to review it. I understand it's a very long study, but a lot of money was spent on it, and that was at your request, and we did it in the timely fashion. And of late, we've been asked to have an arborist go out there, and this process started for us in July, and at this point in time, the zoning for that property, although I appreciate the question, I understand it, but we're very late in the process to be asking for that kind of thing. And the other point was made is that of all of the for lease signs that are along there, but they are not retail space, they're office space. So if there's questions and I can answer this stuff in any way, please do ask us. But again, the bottom line here is I would ask that you maybe do a little look into what we've done to get to this point, and what has happened for the 4 years prior on this particular location and the interaction with the city. And I would beg you to get it on the May 14th meeting schedule. I know you're busy, but we would all greatly appreciate that.
Thank you. Anybody else from the audience that wishes to speak tonight? Anybody in the queue?
There are callers in the queue.
Okay, moving on, communication from council members. Anybody have anything they want to add tonight? See.
I was just going to note that we now have a full complement.
Oh, yes. Councilmember Meadows has appeared for the record. Anybody else? Okay. Communication from city manager.
I have none this evening.
Okay, we move to our discussion items. Item 6.1, further discussion of fiscal year 2025 preliminary budget with emphasis on specific divisions. Mr. Belleman.
So tonight we're going to start with concluding the general fund by having the presentation from the police department, and then we're going to move into all things DPW, which is major and local streets, the utility funds, and then move into Parks and Recreation, and then Parks and Recreation Capital Improvement Fund, and then the overall Capital Improvement Fund for the city. So Deputy Chief Pride and Deputy Chief Brown can come up. I don't know if Deputy Chief Brown will join Deputy Chief Pride to present the police department budget. for those that want to reference in the budget document you received, it's page 101.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. I am here today to present the 2025 budget for the East Lansing Police Department. Some of the highlights in which I would like to talk about at a glance with our 2025 budget are staffing, continuing education or professional development for our staff, as well as civilian staff. And I will take any questions at the end if you have any questions on other issues. So the proposed budget for 2025 has an 11% increase from what it was in 2024. Our goal is to be able to significantly enhance our department's capabilities and the services to the community of the City of East Lansing. Currently, we are budgeted for 51 officers. Right now, we have 47 sworn officers on staff. The request for the 2025 budget is to add 2 additional officers, bringing our total budget to 53 sworn officers. The 2 additional officers will serve as a problem-oriented policing team. We will also supplement that team with 2 of our patrol officers, making it a total of 4, where we can combat our complaints that we're getting from our community in reference to speed enforcement, parking, those types of issues throughout the city. This problem-oriented policing team is being utilized through our neighborhood resource team kits and our blue kits that are problem-solving issues that we're trying to address. Adding those 4 officers, 6 of the 7 kits that we have open are traffic-related. Our goal is to utilize those officers to focus on those specific kits and those specific complaints that come from our community. With that, it's not always about traffic. We have other kits that we deal with in the city as well. We have a downtown kit that is going on in reference to noise, as well as homeless individuals, as well as other factors and things that happen in our downtown area. So our plan is to utilize these 4 officers in that space to address these concerns that have come from us by our community. Currently, we have 27 non-sworn staff in our department. We are budgeted for 33. So we have some room to try to add to those different positions that we're missing, including a parking enforcement officer as well as jail officers, and we have 2 neighborhood resource specialists that we still have to fill positions on as well. We do have processes in place that have already started with those, which my goal is to look to see if we can get these people in place by July 1. But that is going to take a couple more interviews for that process to happen. Our professional development, or what people may say is training, we have increased from $40,000, just under $40,000, to roughly $80,000. If you think about it, we have 47 sworn officers, and that's just sworn. That's less than $1,000 an employee that we spend a year on training. Is there other trainings that we attend? Yes, there's free trainings that we attend. There's collaborative trainings that we attend with other agencies. But the amount of money that we have in that training budget is less than $1,000 for each individual employee. So in this case, we're basically doubling that. And here's the reasons why. There's a potential that we could have 3 to 4 command officers leaving within this next budget year. So the professional development of our younger command staff is vital for us to have them go to either conferences, seminars, or other specialized training or professional development events. So looking at the development of our folks is vital in this budget year. Granted, it's vital every budget year. Our LEPOC talks about it all the time, that additional training is needed for our officers. We have built that into this budget year, especially putting $10,000 specifically towards DEI training. It's about 12% of our training budget, which is going specifically towards DEI. We will do other training as well around DEI. We continue to visit the Jim Crow Museum at Ferris State University. There's talks of us going to the Wright Museum in Detroit. Just be able to allow our folks to learn and observe what, as a police department, we need to make sure that we're doing when we're dealing with people of color or people from a different ethnicity than ourselves. So currently, we have a lieutenant that is overseeing all of our accreditation management. So last year, we became accredited through the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police. We're trying to find a way that we can bring that person, whether, since it's a sworn officer, into a position where police work needs to be done and out of a civilian oversight. So the plan is to hire an additional full-time civilian employee that would oversee accreditation purposes, as well as be a liaison or an individual that can get information for our LEPOC as well. Currently, myself, Deputy Chief Brown, and Lieutenant Park are all providing information to LEPOC. So you have 3 different employees within our department, and we all have other tasks as well. So being able to put one person in place that can give the statistics, give any of the information that they request outside of certain confidential information is where we're trying to bring this person on board to give us, again, another enhancement to our services. We're also looking to change a part-time PACE officer to a full-time PACE officer. That would leave us one less part-time PACE officer, but it's important when we start looking at statistics and assigning people to certain areas, we want to make sure that this employee not only is a supervisor of sort, but also can focus on our downtown with the parking issues that we're seeing downtown. Right now, we are in a time with officer wellness where our officers are working a lot of overtime. Our overtime budget, we have maxed, and actually, I believe we are about 32% over our budget for our overtime. So we're talking about a lot of extra overtime, a lot of extra work, and we are really focused on officer wellness. In our budget, we are requesting a $10,000 wellness app called Cortico, where it allows our employees to go onto their phones, they can request services, and it's totally voluntary, and that information doesn't come back to the city or doesn't come back to the police department. So it's one of the pieces that a lot of agencies are looking at. I know our fire department's looking at it as well, but we are seeing it more and more around the country that different departments are asking for these types of options. And our community policing budget. So in the past, our community policing budget has basically been just using it out of our general fund. We are actually trying to allocate money for this for each of our sectors. We have 5 sectors in the city. Each of our sectors will be able to have $2,000 each, but then they can utilize that for sector meetings, for any community events, you know, and they do these community events every 3 months. They have them quarterly, whether it's bringing people together, you know, for coffee, or whether it's actually doing a popsicles in the park. You know, we had one tailgate last year during one of the home football games, just giving them the ability that instead of always continuously asking for additional money, that they have a pot that they can utilize. I guess I'll open it up for any questions of the council.
Questions? Go ahead, please.
I've got a couple of questions. The 53 sworn officers, you've got 2 rookies coming on. How do you expect to recruit the remaining 4 that you anticipate coming on board this year?
So currently, we have 2 processes, potentially 3, that's going to be starting here soon. So right now, we have 2 internal candidates that are going to a chief's interview. So there's a good potential that we have those 2 that would come on board at some point. Both of them are outstanding employees, but they still have to go through a police academy as well. So there's going to be a little bit of time delay with those. We have another process where we have 3 candidates that are in the background, or not in the background phase of our process. So they're getting to the point where there may be a chief's interview, depending on if all 3 work out. And then we just set interviews for a couple weeks on 2 candidates that are already certified. So they've already been through a police academy. So I'm hopeful with the 7 that we have, we will find good candidates for our community. Lieutenant O'Harrio has been doing an outstanding job at recruiting. Today, he and myself were actually down at the Wilson Talent Center with former Councilmember Garcia, interviewing younger kids that are looking at some point to get into law enforcement. So I'm very excited about what I've seen in our numbers for our applicants, and I believe that we will find enough employees to fill that 53, hopefully by the winter.
Then, although I think Councilmember Watson has a lot more background in this than I do, but in the 6 months or so that I've been liaison to ELIPOC, I think it has been very valuable to have what I'd say professional, not civilian, representatives of the police department at those meetings. So this shift to a civilian liaison, I'm not quite clear on. Do you think it might be better to continue the process that we've had, but have a civilian employee make sure that the information that is requested is forwarded to ELIPOC?
And that's what we're looking for, right? We're going to continue having the sworn personnel there that are there, but having a person that's kind of behind the scenes that can gather that information. When we're receiving requests from the ELIPOC, a lot of that stuff is being taken on by the 3 sworn employees, so I can always push that down to a civilian that can bring me those statistics or bring me that information to be able to pass on to ELIPOC.
And then I do have a question about, you have in the pie chart a cost for parking enforcement. Isn't that part of PACE's operation?
Yes, but PACE is also housed under the
Okay,
police
so
department.
the parking enforcement includes other enforcement as well, not just parking in
Yes,
this pie
code
chart?
enforcement as well.
Okay.
Yep.
And another parking enforcement officer would be somebody who is hired for PACE purposes, is that correct?
It could be either one of those that we would move a part-timer to full-time. I think that's the ultimate plan. I know we have interest, so we wouldn't add an additional part-timer then with that person moving from part-time to full-time.
And I'll just say, personally, I'm very happy to see you double the training that's requested, and I think that, it'd be, if that isn't enough, then let's add some more money to it as well. Okay.
Other questions?
I've got some questions.
Councilwoman Watson?
You said that was a Cortico. Is that the name of the company or the app?
Correct.
And then you said that's a commonly used, maybe more commonly used amongst police departments?
Correct.
And you said it's about how much?
So it's roughly, the first quote we got was $10,000, and then when we found that the fire department was on board, it was bringing that cost down to potentially $7,000, but the last quote I had was $10,000.
Okay, and the person can access it at home, as well?
Correct.
And get some support. That's cool. Is your budget, am I reading your budget that you're separating your DEI training from the city's DEI training?
No, this is an additional training in our budget, and we will also be involved with the city's DEI training.
And will you be talking with our DEI director about, because I see her as the expert in what's out there, the trainings that are being offered, pluses and minuses and things like that. And so will you be in consultation with them as well about it?
I know the chief has already been in consultation with the individual in which we are looking at the training, who's going to be hosting it, and they were at one time working with Truth and Titus, which was the last company in which the city used for DEI training. So, but I think it's a great idea to work alongside with the DEI director in talking about those things.
And are there statistics on people going to museums for a deeper DEI experience? I know we talked about, I think it was the Holocaust Museum before, but in my work, it's not something that we typically talk about. And so, or say, go do this and, so tell me about that, like just kind of, where does that come from?
I don't think there's statistics indicating that you should go to museums to fully understand, but I think there's value to it. I think there's value for people to go to see the different things that happened in the past and things that are continually happening that can maybe shape your decisions or your biases towards when we're dealing with people, whether it's just having a candid conversation or whether it's during an incident that may be a little bit more heated.
And I just want to also encourage you, like, there's books and films, and some of them will come with your guided dialogues. So even if, or even books that you can listen to as an opportunity to grow and learn in the equity spaces. And so I know, like, you talked about the overtime. And just kind of, again, along the lines of like progressively thinking, it's like, what does it look like to reduce your overtime and not just looking at it through like a police lens, but also like what can be shaved off or who can also be taking care of stuff like, we talk about traffic calming, or how do we get to the people that are speeding maybe without involving police interaction.
And those are conversations we've had, around social media presence and stuff like that. I actually was just talking with our lieutenant today about signage and stuff like that. The Michigan Department of Transportation sends us signage that we can put up. And if you've gone down Saginaw, I don't know if you've passed the overpass there, we have placed things up on the signage about click it or ticket, or about speeding, what speeding can do, in hopes that those types of things, even as advertisement, can help slow people down or wear their seatbelt, those types of things.
CNA had made some suggestions on improving the data management system. So is that in the budget?
So our Guardian tracking is in the budget as far as the amount that we are paying for that software. I am currently kind of researching to see what else is out there from a data management standpoint, working with other communities that have IPOCs as well to see what type of software they're using to be able to get that data, and that good data, not the data that sometimes can be very confusing. So I'm in the process of reviewing that to see what else is out there, and hopefully the work with the IPOC, in which they had a meeting the other night in the subcommittees talking about data and the data points that they're looking for, and we're supposed to have that conversation soon so I can be able to provide that correct data to them.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Go ahead, please.
Just following up on the Cortico concept, that I'm just curious from a citywide perspective if that service is available or a contract that could be looked at? This is probably a question more for you, Robert, or our HR director, who may not be here, but that's a service that it helps people utilize their benefits, right, in a confidential way. So I'm just curious if we already have that in other units or what.
I'm not aware of it in other units, but we'll definitely take a look and see if it's applicable.
There could be an efficiency there too on the scale. And then I know Councilman Meadows talked about the recruitment for the sworn officers. I wanted to ask a bit about the non-sworn and recruitment strategies there.
Sure. We're actually, for our cadet program, for our neighborhood resource specialists, for our jail, for our parking, we're having great success in trying to find people for our non-sworn staff. We are currently at 10 cadets. We haven't been at 10 cadets for probably 5-6 years now. At one time, we were down to 4. So, and we have continued applications for those positions. Again, our recruiting team goes out and not only recruits police, but they're recruiting our civilian staff as well. So, having these processes in place right now, our hiring processes, right now we are down 3 jail officers. We have interviews set up for the chief for those jail positions. We have interviews set up for our neighborhood resource specialists. And then right now we have 3 backgrounds for our parking enforcement, which we're down one part-time officer. We have 3 backgrounds right now that are being done. So we're having very good success with our recruiting in not only sworn, but our civilian staff.
Okay. I just want to share a thought on something that we're doing in a state capacity and essentially attracting out-of-state talent. Mm-hmm. If there are units or cities that have high turnover of staffing, I wouldn't be opposed of our communications team doing social media, mm-hmm. LinkedIn, et cetera, recruitment strategies to try to drive up applications. As I know, our city manager aspires us to be a municipal employer of choice in the region. I believe that will be in our strategic plan, hopefully. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there that I'm all for some aggressive strategies there.
Sure. Okay, any other questions? Dr. Altman?
It sounds like the strategy you're pursuing is sort of thoughtful and very constructive, and the department's under a little bit of stress right now, and it sounds like you've got a way forward on a bunch of different fronts, so that's very encouraging. I'm glad you talked about the problem-oriented policing. I was going to ask about that. It sounds like these officers would not be in patrol cars then. They would be focused primarily on addressing the kits that you've got open.
There could be a hybrid of both.
Okay.
It could be a portion where, yes, they could be in uniform and in a patrol car, and then there also could be a potential that they could be in a plain clothes. We don't want them to be focused specifically towards patrol, but towards these problems that the community are bringing to us. So there could be a potential for a hybrid.
It sounds like a really optimal sort of approach, and it's one of those things that I'm a little curious why we haven't done it sooner, which is always a good sign, because that's a good idea that mm-hmm. this time has come. I appreciate that you're going to buy an EV for the criminal investigation division. I did notice earlier on in the budget on page 26, which is not specifically in policing, but there's an entry there for police operations, where there's a goal, if I read it right, to add 16 partially hybrid patrol cars?
So that's always been the potential. Okay. Unfortunately, with Ford, we were not able to get all 16. We had patrol vehicles on order from 2020 that we just received, or actually those were 2022s, but we canceled the 2020 order that we had and the 2021 order that we had, or I should say we didn't. That's their Department of Public Works cars. So I'll kind of let you talk to them about that, but because the availability wasn't there, we are now with gas. We have Tahoes, and now we have 4 Fords that are not hybrid.
So that's just the availability is not catching up.
Correct.
With the okay. On page 1 or 2 of the budget, there's at the end of the programs, there's sort of a useful enumeration of violations that you're going to pursue, including, but not limited to, parking ordinances, litter, rubbish, abandoned vehicles, overgrown lawns, all sorts of a wide range of quality of life issues. Given some of the feedback we've heard recently from the community, I might consider adding noise to that list.
Okay.
I know it's on your radar.
Yep.
But sort of building it into all sorts of places, I think people are coming to appreciate the role of noise as something that affects people in a quality of life and public health way.
I agree.
Can I, while you're looking at your next question, like from a cross-functional standpoint, if you're hearing a lot of noise violations and having to respond to them, this also, I'm looking at Landon, in terms of as we move forward with the community master planning and whether we want to insert any form-based code to include certain types of windows in certain neighborhoods that would help, limit noise to some degree. I just want to point out from a cross-functional standpoint, that could be another way to address problems we're seeing. Thank you, sir.
There's a note in the goals and objectives on page 103 concerning a drone program. And everything there looks good, but I did have a question about security measures at planned and unplanned events. I guess unplanned events, I sort of understand if there's a protest that breaks out, it probably makes sense to get eyes from whatever perspective you can. Planned events, is the idea to have drones over Albert al fresco? I'm not suggesting that's a good idea.
Right.
Just
No,
trying
not
to
specifically over like Albert al fresco, but in the, during the times of the NCAA tournament, when we
Got it.
know that there's a potential for that planned event, that's when we would utilize it,
Got it.
potentially.
So you would predicate it on events where we have had issues in the past?
Correct.
And the goal is to try to head off those issues?
Correct.
Okay.
And we'll have a policy around when we can use it, when we can't
Yep.
use it, those types of things.
Yep, that makes good sense. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the line item breakdown, and the bulletproof vests. Tell me about the amounts and usage and, when they need to be bought again.
So they do have an expiration date. I believe it's 5 years, but don't quote me on that. So right now, we get reimbursed for some of the bulletproof vests over that time, but we have to front the money up front to obviously get them. I wish Diane Schaefer was here, who is she was here. She knows all things budgets. Yeah, I asked her to show up, and I told her that I'd give her a shout out because she did a lot of work on this. Actually,
Okay.
did almost all of it. Did a phenomenal job. But that money we pay up front, and then we get reimbursed for the bulletproof vest. But we do have to change them out every 5 years. Whether the officer wears it every day that they're on duty, or whether they're in a plainclothes assignment and they don't wear as much, we still have to change it out after that expiration date.
Thank you. And Council, I don't have a problem sharing my past communications regarding noise and some of the bumps that I've ran into, or some of what Chubb has suggested, or what Chief had suggested or explained to me for why it's difficult to address the problem. So I can share those for you for your historical reference. And with what you're saying about the overtime, what I'm hearing you say, and I'm wondering if you'll say if I'm correct, we do not have the capacity to be in the schools.
With the amount of staffing we have right now, no, we do not. I think that is something that we need to think about for the future. with the staffing that we'll request maybe in the next budget year. But
And
that's also a conversation with the schools as well.
And I think you know how I feel about the police officers in the schools. It's not something I'm going for, but it would be encouraging to hear that we've got our stuff under control before and there's other alternatives that the school can use besides police officers, our police officers in the schools.
And I think that's a conversation with the schools and the school board.
Definitely. And I also want to say that I'm of the mindset as far as ELIPOC goes, if the ELIPOC officer is spending too much time with ELIPOC, I think you know this too, if they can stay for an hour, that's good for me. There is an interesting back and forth that happens when the police officer is present, as opposed to when the commission is having a discussion amongst themselves. And I think, there's time that can be spent with the police officer, and also there can be time where ELIPOC can have their conversations without the difference that happens with the police officer. So just putting it out there again, that if that's part of the issue and if that can help, I do appreciate, is it Chief Park? Lieutenant Park?
Lieutenant Park.
Lieutenant, I do appreciate his presence, but just, if that's overtime, then thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? I'm sorry? Go ahead, please.
Riddle me this, that I know there has been prior conversation that that we had 67 officers at one moment in time,
When I started in 2000, we had 67 officers.
and those are sworn
Those are sworn.
officers. Okay. And then with the community policing model, the non-sworn staff too, again, because there's a lot of different ways to impact our community safety. Is there still a difference in total staff that you are supporting the community on?
Total staff. So compared to where we were in 2000, is that what you're asking?
So you're at 86 staff right now, is that
Correct.
right?
Correct.
About that? So we still have more people on the street, if you will.
No.
I mean, fewer sworn officers.
Fewer
but-
sworn on the street. Staffing-wise, internally, we are less as well as what we were back then. Because I know we had 5 records staff at the time, and right now we have 4.
Okay.
We are minus we're at 6 jail staff, so we're minus 4 there as well, because we had 10 at the time. Pace officers were also minus. So total, compared to where we were in 2000, we are less staff.
Okay. I'm curious, actually, to that breakdown. If in a subsequent discussion, if we could see that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Who do you have up next, Mr. Bellman?
Scott House and others on major streets, which starts on page 157 of your budget book.
Good evening, Council. Scott House, Director of Public Works. With me is Ron Lacoste. I'm going to turn it over for Ron real quick to introduce the team.
Again, I'm Ron Lacoste, Deputy Director. I'm pleased to announce or introduce you to the operations team at DPW, and I'll start with the Water Resource Recovery Facility. We have our Superintendent, Todd Nichols. If you could stand up as I read your name so they can see. We have Assistant Superintendent Eric Thalen. Assistant Superintendent Josh Moore. Out of our engineering department, we have the Administrator Stephen Clayton. We have the senior project manager, Alando Chappell. Environmental and Sustainability Manager, Cliff Walls, which I'm sure all of you know. GIS and Asset Management, we have Dina Fitzgerald. Administrative Services, we have Brad Phillips. And then operations, we have the supervisor of our operations team, which is all the people you see out and about in the community, our supervisor, Homer Allen. And the supervisor of our fleet, Marcus Grosshans. this is the team that really keeps things running at DPW and makes everything happen out in the community.
And I'm gratified you all came tonight, and I wanted to let you know that your city manager tipped me off about 3 or 4 days ago that you were all going to be here. So I've spent the last 3 days jotting down 4 or 5 questions for each of you. So I don't want you to be nervous. I don't want you to just relax. They'll all be easy, lawyer-type questions, getting into the whole detail, and you can thank Ron for making sure you were here, okay?
So, good evening, council. One of the other reasons we wanted to have them here, our budget is in total $82 million. This is largely the authors of that budget. They all made entries. They all put their sweat and tears into building this. You'll see their names throughout the budget document as well. So we appreciate their efforts and input on building this. But for starters, not quite out of the general fund yet, because we have $6.9 million of general fund in the public works budget. And I'm just going to break out how this presentation document is made up. There's 3 slides. First 2 slides break down our funds, talk about the divisions, key fee changes, projects, and risk. And I'm just going to go through that, and I expect challenging questions because I got a great team here that I can use to phone a friend with. So we'll keep rolling with that. So under the general fund, that's our administration, engineering. Of note, the there's a typo there. Environmental services is for the first time here. Street lights, downtown maintenance, sidewalks, drains and alleys, and parks maintenance. Key fee changes right there. We have soil erosion and sedimentation control rates. The big increases there were we increased the deposits on developers. What we found was there was risk with some of our rates that if someone walked away from a project, we'd be left holding the bag. So you'll see bond increases, the deposits increasing there, and other rates increasing with the rate of inflation. Who does this impact primarily? Developers and builders. And these are refundable. So, but that just putting that in there. And the other one is park rental. Patriarch Park rental has changed slightly. It used to be a bunch of little areas. Now it's broken into fewer zones. So there's not a big increase. It's just you're renting more area, but the price increased as well with that as well. Then everything else adjusted with inflation. The Public Works team routinely increases our rates every year because our costs go up with labor, equipment, fleet, IT, cell phones, all that takes to provide services in the field. Key projects in the general fund, hazard sidewalks, community development block grant funds flow through there, $209,000. We have the Red Cedar Community Association egress path, which is in the planning phases that would go from Emerson Park along the border of Red Cedar Elementary pending final design and connecting with Narcissus. We have drain repairs and also, more importantly, the block tree pruning and the planting. And we saw the impact of that today with Cliff and his team safely removing the large oak tree on Hagedorn that was leaning, and there was a lot of problems with that tree. And had that tree fallen, that would have been a bad day for motorists and households locally. The risk with the general fund, we were impacted by rate increases by the electricity for our street lights. We see increased fees for our drains from the drain commissioners, and we need consistency of funding for our tree program. And we still have that challenge of how do we fund stormwater. Our sewers work great when it's dry. Our problem is when it drains. And is that the sewer's problem or is that a stormwater problem? Moving on to the sewer fund. There we have the administration collection system, the WRF, just to point out 40% of that cost is with Michigan State University, Meridian Township's 33.3%, and we're 26.7% per contract. Rate increases there, 4.4%, or $2.48 per month. So that's for an average user, a family unit of 3 to 4 individuals. That's roughly 15,000 gallons. Some will use more, some will use less, depends if you have teenagers at home or whatnot. The big projects there are a couple SRF projects. We have the wood SRF collection system improvement, which is shown on the map on budget page 239. There's a map a couple pages after that. But that's a separation project running into the Bailey neighborhood, going south of into Water's Edge as well. They'll be removing rainwater from a combined sewer, getting rid of a CSO, combined sewer overflow to the Red Cedar. That's roughly $20 million. That could be a 2 to 3 year project. That also then we have the WRF, Water Resource Recovery Facility, Operations Facility, and Optimization Improvements, roughly $27 million. What that will do is we'll fix the areas where the employees do their primary work. They do their maintenance, they do their lab work. It will improve the facilities. Currently, our female restroom is in the basement. We want to build better facilities for people to change, come in and out of work, so they can come in clean, leave, go have a nice locker room to change and leave clean at the end of the day as well. And then we have funding for sewer lining and sewer repairs related to street projects. Challenge there is inflation. We're paying more for less. We're seeing that across the board. There's so much construction right now, there's not a lot of bandwidth. We're not getting great prices. And then other challenges, what would be eligible for the SRF funding? We had the challenge with the drinking water. We're hoping that we're competitive for the clean water. Next, jumping to the water fund on page 251, where we have administration, purchase of water, and distribution. 4.2% rate increase, $1.69 a month. Big projects there, lead and galvanized service line replacement, the water meter phase 1, and then we're going to have water main associated with the Woodmere project, where we'll include a non-eligible SRF costs, but while we're working in that area, replace water main. Challenges there will be inflation, and our biggest sticking point is the lack of SRF eligibility for that. The fact that we didn't get SRF funding or grant funding for lead and copper, that's hitting us hard. That we're paying roughly $2.8 million to out of cash. That's competing with other projects that are taking projects off the table. That SRF funding will enable us to take a bigger bite, tackle a bigger project, and use debt to fund that. Now we have to cash fund. So that has had a trickle-down impact to our CIPs, and that will be a multi-year impact. Going next to the garage fund, and with that, it's kind of our mixing fund. It's on page 265. We have the fleet, we have the geographical information systems, and we have the asset management, and we have the internal service fund. No fees are charged from that. With the key projects for that, 15 vehicles. There will be one electric vehicle previously referenced for the police department. We're also getting the fire department their one ladder truck. It's being replaced early. We had a challenge where a frame broke on the ladder truck. We don't want to go down that road again. The corrective repair for that could be $400,000 to $300,000 that we'd be wasting. So we appreciate the support on moving that forward to replace that asset, especially as we have higher buildings and the fire needs those capabilities. Also, in support of the fleet, we have a large vehicle lift that will be able to lift our larger vehicles. That's about $275,000. When the fleet and the facility was built, the equipment got heavier, and to safely service this equipment and to avoid and to identify hazards early on, being able to lift that vehicle all the way up and being under it's an important capability, and to do it safely. Also, just as a reminder, our facility is 20 years old, so things are going to need to be replaced, such as this. Excuse me. We also have a small vehicle lift that has increased capability to lift heavier small vehicles such as electric vehicles. There have been upgrades planned so far, but we need to plan ahead for the future with that. We have a facility study programmed as well. The intent there is we're at 20 years old. Where do we need to go in the future? We know we need more cold storage. We know we need a workshop. What can we do to save more energy? How can we decarbonize that facility? And that goes to the next point. We intend to implement the solar improvements in phase 1, and then followed by geothermal. We want steadfastly tick off those priorities. And then we have GIS improvements and servers and assets for that. Again, our challenges with the garage, inflation, then the abbreviation, sorry for not spelling that, low emission vehicles and electric vehicle availability. Our challenges, we get a grant, we want to get one. It's very hard to get, it's tremendous demand. Talk to Marcus, he's like, you can get one that's $90,000, but we want the base model that's more affordable, that will fit our needs. You'll be seeing something on your agenda in the coming months about a grant to buy 2 EVs in this fiscal year, because we have a grant we want to execute, and we found more affordable ones and a way to get after that. But to the chief's point prior to this, the hybrid vehicles were great. The problem is supply has dwindled, immense competition, production was delayed, and we need to keep the police equipped with vehicles at work, and unfortunately the hybrids were not a great solution due to availability. All right, jumping to the next page, local streets on page 155. Local streets are the nearest and dearest. We have 80 miles of those in the city. With that, we fund traffic, street maintenance, traffic control, winter maintenance, right-of-way maintenance, and street projects. Our key fee changes there, rate of inflation. Our fund balance at the end of the year will be 13%. The key projects there, we have Northern Tier paving. That's going to be the neighborhood up beyond Myers and then Cricket Lane. Just streets that are distressed. We're going to do a mill and fill and correct that. Local street match, we're going to contribute funds to the Woodmere project because not all that SRF project is eligible for sewer funding. We have to contribute street funding to make up the delta of that. We have pavement preservation. We're requesting $200,000 for that. Well, our challenge is we're good at paving streets and we're good at responding to streets at end of life. We need a solution for 10 years. We need to extend the service life. We've experimented with that in Abbey and other areas, but we need to implement that more because we can't afford to pave all the streets. We need other solutions that will extend service life and save the dig-ups when we go after utilities. We also have drain repairs that we're involved with that as well, and we have drains from streets contributing to outfalls and drains, so street funds are going to contribute to those drain repairs along with the drain fund. That's equitable and fair. Then we have pavement markings as well, approximately $180,000, and traffic calming. I know there were some questions about traffic calming. Currently, we just completed a citywide traffic study at 14 locations. There will be a meeting later in May. We're going to release those findings. The Transportation Commission was getting a lot of input about speeding on local streets. We wanted to gather that data, and we wanted to pull this together with the non-motorized plan because we figured some people won't show up for the non-motorized, but they'll sure come about traffic calming, get them all together and talk. And this is the funding to implement signs, speed bumps, other things, because in the past we didn't have bandwidth to do that. So if we put it there, people can work with the Transportation Commission to make improvements. Go into major streets on page 147, similar divisions, except we have the trunk line. That's where we maintain Michigan Department of Transportation roads. They give us money, and it's a cost reimbursement. You know, think in Saginaw, Michigan, a small portion of Coolidge and Grand River. MDOT's responsible for that, and we will work on the maintenance. Fees are increasing at the rate of inflation, about 20% fund balance. A lot of work going on here on this fund. We have the Harrison Road Bridge. We have concrete and retaining wall replacement also on Harrison Road. That concrete section of Harrison, south of Michigan, right there by the Kellogg Center, our goal is to replace that when the bridge is out of service. Just get rid of that. It's a maintenance nightmare. It's beyond its useful life. We also have a retaining wall. As you go north there, on the west side of the road, there's a stone wall. We looked through records, we own it. We took it down once to widen Harrison and we put it up. It's starting to buckle and fail. We want to get that replaced before it fails and we can't use that sidewalk. Also with that, we have major street funding match for Woodmere for the sewer projects. We have the Trowbridge signals. We are getting general fund for that. We're also anticipating additional cash funding. We will try to twist MDOT's arm as best as possible, but we're just building in the budget to be conservative for that. We're looking at a signal study to further look at what are the conditions of our signals, a lot of feedback regarding pedestrian signals, and we have just a lot of poles are old, and looking at where we should prioritize those efforts. And then we have Hazlitt Road as our federal aid project through the Surface Transportation Program. That will go under design. There's interest in potentially making that 4 to 3. We need to look at the volumes and see if do a study to see if that would be a good candidate street for that. Then we also have Safe Routes to School housed in here as well. Roughly $800,000 of improvements throughout the city, drain repairs, pavement markings, and then we have some improvements to Albert Avenue right downtown here, where we have some top coating we have to do, some curb repair. We also have some manholes that we're going to level and crack, and a sewer work further down to the east on Albert as well. We just had so much work going on there, so much. This is the final integration and cleanup. We thought further development was going to happen. It's not, so we're going to top coat that. Funding for risks with streets in general is the Act 51 funding model is antiquated. The state's trying to fix it. But as cars become more fuel efficient, less fuel is used, less revenue, and it doesn't jive. So we're impacted by that. This was our smallest increase of Act 51 in several years. So that's not a good news story. And then last but not least is solid waste on page 179. That funds your solid waste collection, yard waste, recycling, the drop-off center. We have a good fund balance of 27%. We expect that to be attributed by increased cost in landfill. Of note, we have not seen major increases from Granger in years. They've been very reasonable. But given the large fund balance, we are not suggesting any fee increases there because if we're able to keep the fees low, that we want to do that because it's millage funded. Key things we're looking at there is redesigning the DPW drop-off. It's a tough location to service those dumpsters and have people going in and out, and it's kind of camouflaged behind there. We want to put it more up front, potentially intermingled with a solar field, but also we want to do some maybe expose on low-impact development, make it a better site for people to access, and keep the traffic pattern out of our location. Then we continue our Bircham landfill monitoring. And the last risk is there's always fluctuation in commodities. Recycling market goes up and down depending on the price of oil, will drive the cost of plastics and papers and whatnot. That's that slide. Then the next slide is rates. Where do we stand? So Bluff, these are our rates compared, 25 proposed rates compared to standing 24 rates for our neighboring jurisdictions. I anticipate that they will increase. Right as they stand right now, we're right in the middle. When we look at older communities that have combined sewers, older water lines that are investing, we are on par with them. We've appreciated the continued support in investing in our systems, our infrastructures, that we could tackle these problems long term. Because when we look back, our rates were very low, but we weren't doing anything. Now you're giving us money, we're executing projects, we're making improvements. And that's what we have to do continuously. So, subject to your questions.
Thank you. Questions?
I have just a few.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The solar that you're planning at DPW, is that subject to federal tax credits?
The goal is to design it in such a way that we can maximize current grants. There's potential opportunities that, I'm going to phone a friend. Cliff, you want to jump up?
Yeah, there's multiple grants we're looking at. The Renewable Ready Communities is up to $3 million for municipalities for things like this. The Inflation Reduction Act also closed a major loophole or gap, I guess, in the federal solar incentives, because previously for the last 10, 15 years, it's always been a tax credit. Well, we don't pay taxes, so we don't have that opportunity. But the IRA addressed that by creating a 30% direct pay option. So you could just get essentially direct payment from U.S. Treasury. So it's something that a lot of municipalities and churches in the area especially have been taking advantage of. So like a couple of the churches in town, they came to the ZBA. There were some challenges with our existing ordinance. That's the reason that it all happened at once, is because all of a sudden everyone had a 30% off coupon. The Board of Water and Light changed their rules. That made it way more attractive, high credits, and then less red tape. And so the time is now, and a lot of things have changed since the last feasibility study that the city had done.
Great, thank you. It looks on page 55 of the budget, and then later again, it looks like you're losing a design engineer.
So we're reformatting what we have, where the positions are. We have returning positions on and off based on talent. So we just recently lost a design engineer, Justice Lewis. He went to a private firm, and engineers are in super demand. And to be frank, we're all headhunted all the time. We are at 50% strength in a department of 6 in engineering. Stephen and Lando are running, and Britt, our field inspector, is doing great. We're trying to add strength to it, but we're working with HR to solve those problems.
Well, it looked like you were actually budgeting one fewer position.
We were maintaining the head count of 6. And what we did was we brought in Lando, who, 20 years of industry experience at the Board of Water and Light, and public service director from a township managing projects, so we're reconfiguring what we're doing there.
Got it. Okay.
And we were thinking about adding more, but we wanted to, we wanted to keep the staff viable and how we can move the ball forward.
And along similar lines, you're losing a maintenance supervisor at the wharf?
No, I think that's just,
I'm looking at page 61.
the head count at the wharf stays constant. The position day and night shift, that's what you're looking at.
You got some help here.
Yeah.
I think that changes when they went to 2 assistant
Yes.
supervisors. So changing that plant, I don't know the word, but when they went to 2 assistant supervisors, that where that change came from.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just saw the -1 and I was
Yeah.
wondering what was up with that. All right.
So in total, we have 79 FTEs. We have a couple interns and funding budgeted for contingents. And in actuality, we added a position of our forester or arborist.
Great. So it sounds like you're sort of moving stuff around a little bit,
Yes.
but basically staying stable.
Yes.
Okay. So the adding environmental services as a cost center seems like a great idea. Pull a bunch of stuff together. Just a comment.
The irony were the Department of Public Works and Environmental Services, and it was always an additional duty. We appreciate council putting the resources behind it so
Yep.
we can do more.
Well, we're getting great. I mean, we're getting great results. So it's terrific. The issue of stormwater has come up in a lot of discussions, and so forth. And I understand that that's a subject of litigation at the state level, right? Ann Arbor has a stormwater authority, somebody's suing them because they're saying it's a tax. But I also gathered that there's some chance that this legislature will do the right thing. Do we want to have a stormwater ordinance ready in case good things happen?
We could look at that. I think it's going to come down to the enabling legislation and how to treat it like a utility versus a fee, because other communities have it ongoing, like Detroit, for all intents and purposes, has one as well. There's several cities along, cities you wouldn't think about that have them. There's about 6 in effect in the state right now. I think once it would not be hard to get one going. I think the big one is educating the people, educating about the need. Our sewers are great when there's not rain, but when it's raining, water's going somewhere, it's getting treated, it needs to be conveyed, it creates challenges, and there's costs.
Well, and everybody understands that stormwater is going to become more and more of an issue, right, with the severe weather events and so forth. So I guess my general question is, what can we do starting now to get ready in terms of education or ordinances or both to make sure that we have the funds to do this right?
I don't have a great answer for that right now. I think once it comes down to the legislation, once that's passed, that would give us a glide path forward. So concurrently, we have the high water infrastructure grant that's ongoing right now to look at where are our vulnerabilities in conveying flow, and that's a multi-year project. And honestly, I think getting the stormwater utility up and running will take resources as well, because when you do that, you have to assess each property for permeable, unpermeable surfaces, look at offsets for rain barrels, rain gardens, things like that. There's a bunch of levers in there as well. It'll be a complex program. We could certainly visit with Ann Arbor and other areas and see how they're going and maintain that and have a concept of how we would roll out. But
That's sort of my thought, is if it's going to be complex, maybe we can get a running start.
And we could, in theory, we could engage with a consultant even that's familiar with it and go, give us a roadmap.
So I think a 4-to-3 conversion on Hazlet would be great. I support them in general, but also there's the turn, if you're headed eastbound on Hazlet, there's the turn to Merritt, which gets some traffic, and it's one of those places where it's begging for rear-end collisions, it seems to me. So I was glad to see that was on the table potentially. At the corner of Albert and Abbott, there's those divots in the manholes that we talked about. So thank you for putting those on the table. They spill my coffee every time I drive over them. Are we getting styrofoam recycling at DPW?
We are. We currently do. There's a delay in a grant to get a compactor.
Densifier.
What?
Densifier.
Densifier. It's just.
That's great.
It's in permitting for.
Jump up there. Just stay by that mic, Cliff.
This is just a supply chain challenge, or a supply chain challenge, like a lot of other things. But just a couple weeks ago, I finally got a call back from the Air Quality Division at Eagle. So we're just kind of in the, we're seeking an exemption because it's so low. But because it's Eagle funded, we have to make sure we're doing all the, crossing all of our T's on something that exhausts. But I'm assuming, in a month we'll probably be ready to strike. But it's been approved, the RFP went out, all that stuff, but the purchase with the contractor or the firm was contingent on this air quality situation. So basically, once we get that cleared up, and Eagle said there's no expected delay, we'll just be ready to go.
Great, so we don't have to drive down to Mason.
Well, we've always, for the last, Kathy, when did the recycling, oh, you're talking about like the actual processing, correct? Yeah, never mind.
Yeah,
We're collecting it, but there's what is currently filling up an entire 18-wheel trailer with loose, probably just a few hundred pounds of styrofoam. We'd be able to fit that on a pallet. And we did meet with someone who, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but we just met with a buyer out of Byron Center who turns that into foam boards for home building insulation. And currently the market's at 26 cents a pound, so it's something that will not only be able to kind of be operationally more efficient, but we could recover some costs as well.
That's great.
And at worst, it just goes to the landfill
Yep.
smaller. Not that that's going to be the case, but densifying is good regardless what you do with it.
Since No Mow May is coming up, is there a problem with you getting into the weeds?
True,
Oh,
true.
just a-
I'm happy to get in the weeds, I just don't want to speak too much.
Scott, could you say a little bit more about why we were not eligible for some SRF funding, but we were for other SRF funding?
So there's two pots of SRF funding. There's the clean water, which is the sewer system collection and the water resource recovery facility. Then there's the drinking water. They changed with the ARPA and other Inflation Reduction Act, there was greater incentives and added to focus on disadvantaged communities. And we look at it's like 25 points on it for the drinking water for eligibility. So when we throw our projects up there, we're not competitive against, say, Detroit or a bigger municipality that has greater need than in theory. Our goal is to bug Eagle about, hey, we're paying for this lead and copper. Are you going to help us? We're hoping more grants would come down for something like that. The challenge is we might be being too aggressive up front, but we'd rather get it out. And talking with Ron, who deals with this, you're going to chime in about how much time you spend on that.
Yeah, and I've presented to council previously on this. It's a very labor-intensive process. Every house is different, as you can imagine. Going into the basement, figuring out how you're going to get it there, and then you go outside and there's a concrete patio outside. So it's a very difficult project. We're somewhere in the as low as maybe 6,000 or 7,000, as high as maybe 10,000 per property to get this done. So it's very expensive.
So the lead and copper stuff seems like it is a large unfunded mandate. And I guess,
But we also want it out of the system. Because to us, that out there, it's a vulnerability, it's a liability. You have one, I don't, and just how to.
right, and I guess my question is this an issue where we should engage our lobbyists for legislation to help with this? Or are we already doing that?
We're already doing that.
Okay, even better. You mentioned Abbey Road with the experimentation. Was that chip sealing? Was that what you used up there?
So it's a chip seal with a fog sealant on top of it. So the county will do a typical chip seal where you put tar down and gravel. Yeah. We don't like that because we want a more finished one, so we added an asphalt sealant on top of it. And that held up pretty, that's going on 5 to 6 years. That held up well. We did the same thing at our Public Works parking lot. It's an alternative to repaving. Our challenge will be on the local streets, will that be accepted? Because we've heard feedback from other communities that wasn't appreciated for rollerblading, skateboarding, I don't know, but looking at those alternatives.
So we did, I think, I remember that from last time I was here, we authorized that, and so I'm interested to hear that it sounds like it was a success, and you're thinking about expanding it.
Yes.
Hazardous sidewalks, is the solution there the asphalt wedges?
So that's the challenge of hazardous sidewalks, grinding is a solution for small things. That's time intensive, creates a bunch of dust. For bigger displacements, wedges are the solution to cover ground. And then eventually removing and fixing through the assessment process. The challenge with the hazardous sidewalk program, it's very labor intensive. It can, and property owners don't necessarily like it at times, and because it can be costly as well.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about mud jacking before. Is that?
And we looked at that for even here. There's not enough capacity here, and it was cheaper to replace the sidewalk than mud jacking. We didn't have money to replace the sidewalk either, so we didn't either.
And then you and I have talked periodically about a signals change at Grand River and Harrison, and also Harrison and Saginaw. And you mentioned that these things are on NDOT's radar. Do we have any idea what the timeline is? You said they're evaluating the whole corridor.
Yep, and I don't think they're going to change necessarily. They're looking at timing, they're looking at upgrades. We know there are certain times, I don't want to speak for MDOT on this, because as the primary road owner on that, we have input, but ultimately they're going to be the final decision maker, and we have monthly calls with them talking about signals, and they're evaluating things. I don't have a great answer on what the next step is with them right at this point, but we can follow up.
But they're aware that there would be potentially benefits to having left turn phases north and south.
We share all of our comments that we receive with them, and they're aware.
And they take it under advisement?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And many of them are local residents.
Yeah.
And we talk to them about, can we get a ground crossing at Saginaw and Harrison? Like, well, maybe not, but it'd be so much easier in a non-motorized environment.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Meadows?
Yes, just a sort of a general question. You got into the CIP in your comments, and are we doing that separately, or should I ask questions about that at this point?
If it's DPW, I'd ask now.
Okay, a couple of things. For one, you and I have had conversation about the Chandler Road improvements that are being proposed, and I would like to, I think our involvement has been not exactly embraced by the road commission in the adjoining county. And I'm wondering whether I can get some information from the city attorney on that. I know that when we took over land north of Lake Lansing Road, we ended up having to sue the Ingham County to get control over that particular stretch. And I'd like to know whether we have a similar option so that we can have a greater influence with regard to the improvements to Chandler Road. So that wasn't on your radar today, but I thought of it as you were talking.
And as you're speaking of that, we are invited to a meeting on the 13th at 8 o'clock at the Clinton County Road Commission to talk that.
Okay. With regard to the sewer and the water fund increases, can you tell me what your assumption was in terms of the $248 per month? And the one, you might have said that, but I think I missed it during your conversation.
So when we look at the rates, we build the rates based on what our operating costs, what's the cost increase for electricity, what's the cost to just keep the lights on, then we add on capital. This is the project we want to afford, then that's where it goes. Then we adjust our capital outlay based on that to keep it within reason. We could easily make rates increases larger, but we don't want to be too aggressive, but we need to be able to increase the rates to a degree that we're able to execute a project. Also, in the same thing we're facing with sewer and water is chemicals are increasing, electricity is increasing, gas is increasing. So and then the cost of construction materials is increasing. So in reality, this is almost a flat increase for what we're doing, but we're still able to execute projects. Saving our bacon is all the improvements at the wharf, where when these projects go on, we're gonna cut $500,000 off our electrical bill. Those are things that are gonna help us give back and keep on investing in the system.
Right, and those are absolutely identifiable costs. But what I'm really asking is, in terms of the end user, our homeowners,
Yep.
and their increase, what is the assumption in terms of usage?
15,000 gallons per quarter, $5,000 a month for a family unit of 3 to 4 individuals.
Okay. And then this stormwater issue, our combined sewer overflow system is not sufficient to deal with what we expect going forward?
No, we did a CSO study. We need to improve it. We need to separate more. We need to build for bigger storms. We have the high water infrastructure grant that will help us understand the cost implication or service implication by expanding a pipe size. And you're talking about big pipes. Every time you add inches, you add thousands of dollars. But while you're doing it, might as well do it right, so you can prepare for the future. And reality here, if storms become too inconsistent, it might not be reasonable to expect a sewer system to be able to convey things. But there might be a need, this is hypothetically, there might be a need for homeowners to better bulletproof their basements with backflow preventers, other things to reduce that liability and vulnerability.
And the current system, so are you proposing that at some point in the future, we retunnel under?
No, we're fighting our collection system, trying to dry that out, trying to get flow to the plant, trying to get wet weather out of the sewer, get it to the rivers, dry it out per se. This is going to be a perpetual problem, and the sewer system works great during the design storm. The problem is when you get a rainstorm of 7 inches, every sewer is going to fail. It's not designed for that. In a separate system, you'll be better off. In a combined system, you're getting everything all at once. And the further you are downstream, the greater the vulnerability.
Okay, one of the items on the CIP, of course, is these 2 new traffic lights on Trowbridge. And I was curious about, I think the total value of that is $745,000 according to the CIP.
So the numbers there might have fluctuated from what we were going. We had design baked into that. That's off the table. That's a more conservative number, because when MDOT was here, we've had since discussions, is like, is that really the number? But also MDOT's at the table, and our goal is to continue to engage with them about, well, how do we make this smaller?
Well, I think we were very generous in approving the changes on Trowbridge Road, apparently. So we're going to have to pay for these signals that
Yes.
we requested?
Yes.
And they are not paying for them?
They're going to pay for design. They'll pay for the site work, the signals themselves. So we don't have a design here. We don't know what the costs are going to be. So we're just putting a placeholder there for what the cost will be. It could be
So
lower.
this is likely to be less than $745,000?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel a little more comfortable. And then you mentioned speed bumps.
Yes.
And just note that historically, anyway, in East Lansing, there are speed undulations, and that would be like in the first block of Spartan Avenue.
Yeah.
So,
Anything else?
that's it.
Ms. Watson?
Are you on, and so you mentioned Patriot Park, which I was surprised. I thought I was under Parks and Rec. But I think, and for those that don't know, I am in the back on the fee schedule, and I go through the fee schedule to ask questions about substantial increases that, and I even am beginning to think in the future that perhaps substantial increases should already just come with an explanation. But that's an overall thing for everyone's knowledge on what's going to be happening with all these appendixes and all my questions. But you mentioned Patriarch Park rental. Was that you?
Yeah, so we talked about that. So we'd love to have this part of Parks and Rec, so our team will staff Patriarch Park. They will be there staffing it to rent it out to people. In the past, you could rent variations of tables and different combinations. Now it's by zone, so you get like a quarter, half, whole, and the new fee schedule reflects that. There's not drastic increases, it just better reflects how the park operates and reduces some of the complexity for planning for users.
So just to bring everyone up to where we are, we're on Appendix A-6, and I'm at the top where it talks about Patriarch Park rental. And so when I look at it, if you can explain again, we never charged the $35 fee. The $120 increase is substantial, and then the $40 fee hasn't been charged before. The $220 is substantial increase, and the $50 fee was not charged before. Yeah.
And these are great questions, and we're happy you're asking these, because what this is doing was before you were getting areas, then you got separate costs. So this is giving you a guaranteed set of tables, and then you have a cost escalation for additional tables. And when you look at some of these fees, you're getting half, you're getting a pavilion for all day or half with a substantial amount of tables for these costs. This is a big area that people are renting.
But why the huge jump?
It's,
I can-
yeah, jump in.
Yeah, and I worked with the Parks and Rec staff. We talked this through. The big change really in the pavilion is they used to rent it by the quarter, but people didn't really rent it by the quarter, so we split it so it's rented by the half. So if you look at the fees previously, they were based on a quarter of the pavilion. And so there is an increase there, and I don't remember off the top of my head what it is, but most of that change is because it's rented by the half now. The outside areas, if you look at the cost per table, for our staff to set up that area and put trash cans, make sure it's cleaned up and ready to go, there's a certain minimum cost. So if somebody rented an entire area and wanted 2 tables out there, we didn't get much revenue to offset the cost for us to do that. So we put kind of that flat fee that recovers the cost for us to provide that service. And then if you want a big party, then you're going to pay the per table rate. So that's kind of why we looked at it. It's not necessarily changing the cost too much. It's just giving us that backstop minimum so we recoup our cost for smaller reservations, if that makes sense.
Can you let me know the all day for the pavilion? Can you let me know how many people rented that or, did the $70 at some point? Or do you have it today?
Phone and a friend.
Yes.
I don't have all the numbers with me, but I take the reservations for that park. Just to kind of give you an idea, today is April 23rd. Any weekend now is full unless you want to go to August 17th. So it's very popular. Every Saturday and Sunday is full. There's a lot of weekdays. I can get you the numbers. I can give you a breakdown of how many people do full and partial. As far as when Ron was talking about people renting picnic tables in outer areas of the park, the fact that we put that rate in there for those that do less than 5 or 10 tables may seem large, but for the number that are that small, it's really not that huge of an impact. It's more for the benefit of the workers at DPW. When people call to rent tables, it's usually not just 1, 2, or 3 tables. They're looking at 10, 15, 20 tables.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What's the sink use? The sink use?
Yeah, there's a sink in the pavilion that can be rented with one of those reservations. And that's proven to be problematic because it ends up getting broken a lot. So we want people to think, I guess, do they really want the use of that sink? And if they want to use it, there's an expense there to keep that functioning.
Is it a faucet to rinse out cups or possibly?
Yep, they can rinse things out and that type of thing, clean things up and prepare certain things on the spot.
All right. Thanks. Thank you. My next question is around the water bills. How's it looking for monthly bills?
Great question. To do that, we need to update our meter system, and we're on this budget, and we currently have funding this year, and this budget will implement the pilot. That's the intent. There will be parallel discussions with regional partners about are there solutions available to do it a different way. But it's going to be a while before we get there, and there will be trickle-down impacts too to our finance team too, where it might impact their staffing levels and needs. But the goal is once we get the technology implemented, then that will be the pathway forward.
And I should know this because I get this a lot, but what's the late fee? Is it $20 or $25? And I'm okay with waiting.
The late fee is 5% of whatever the balance is on the bill. The tagging fee is $18 and the shut-off fee is $50.
Well, the shut-off is $50.
Yes.
It was the 18 probably plus that I was thinking of that
Yep.
I often pay. Can you get me a breakdown of how that trends? You know, like, does it trend more in the wintertime? Or I don't know if you can get trends by areas, but is it more problematic in certain areas? And just so, you know, people know, like, this is a quarterly bill, and it's a quarterly bill that, you know, I have to pay and have the money for. And when you're used to, like, getting paid and balling on a budget, getting paid every other week or, you know, even monthly, you don't always have that $300 on hand, and then you forget. I forget to pay my water bill, and then the notice comes. But I'm curious about how that's looking for other people, and just the thing about who pays for what, you know, in this community. And sometimes when people are behind on their bills, they don't have the money, or they're scrounging, you know, to get the money. So I look forward to monthly billing for our bills. And I wondered, in the meantime, about how some companies offer you monthly bills or monthly averages that you can pay. And I also think about, like, the escrow, how sometimes, you know, when you're paying your house payment, they'll let you know if your escrow is kind of behind, but, you know, you kind of get an opportunity to, like, possibly stay ahead or just kind of stay on top of it. So just throwing that out there.
So we'll definitely work with our partners in Treasury. So we supply the water, we treat it, and we fix the mains, and they'll handle the billing, but we can help get some GIS analysts with some maps and who's impacted.
Thank you. And you're not any of the investigation fees that are on? No. Okay, I didn't think so. All right. Thank you.
Just wanted to highlight, I'm not going to ask specific questions outside of what Councilman Altman and Meadows mentioned on the sewer piece. I mean, decarbonizing our work is one thing, but to be climate resilient, we have to really think about those sewers. And especially when that's really probably what our community will be most impacted by. And then this plays into where we are falling in the rates. If, as we look forward 5-10 years and what those replacement fees will look like for the larger pipes, et cetera, if we have to start thinking about a strategic plan that may impact our rates, it probably will be helpful for the community to know what we're paying now and that we're not top, as some people think, in terms of taxes or rates on this equation. So encourage that to take place. I want to, this is like a random, and I know it's MDOT jurisdiction along Saginaw, but is there something that we could consider in the future on pedestrian bridges to increase connectivity? I live north of Saginaw, and I think that Saginaw line is feels disconnected, especially when you have younger kids, even though there's at least 2 incremental bridges. Anything, and I know this is going to be an MDOT piece, like anything that's visually more appealing than the steel bridges. I'm not even sure if that's possible, but I just wanted to share that. The last thing I want to say, and then these are all big picture to try to be brief so the mayor doesn't strangle me, but I just want to say, you've been very quiet and patient. I just want to say again to the team that's here on top of the teams you represent, they're a joy when you run into them in the neighborhoods and out in the street, whether they're, giving their leftover or what's left of their lunch to my dog, after asking for permission, or talking about my dogs, or trying to make conversation with my son. It is just so, so incredibly valuable to have that close-knit feel amongst our city workforce and the community. So thank you. That's it.
That's it? That's all you got?
That's all I got.
Okay, are we done with Mr. House? Or did we float into some of his subsequent topics? I kind of, okay. Any more questions? Okay.
Well, we were done.
What did I just say? Go ahead, Dr. Altman.
Thank you. I wanted to echo the Mayor Pro Tem's comments. I hear that from people in the community, that interacting with DPW staff is just always a really positive experience. So, could you say a little bit more about the scope of the water meter pilot?
So water meter pilot, the goal is to release an RFP, get an open source technology that we're not bound to one supplier that goes out of business. We implement it in several homes where it can be remote read, test that, see how it works out, how can we scale up from there. And the challenge is maintaining the existing system with the new system. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an expensive project to go citywide, so the idea in the RFP is to pilot an area and make sure that it works the way that we think it's going to work, and that we can move forward maintaining kind of the old system and the new system, because we see this happening over a period of 4 or 5 years to roll it out citywide. So they have to kind of prove that it works before we roll it out citywide.
And for the houses that you include in the pilot, would people volunteer, or would you do it by region?
We would have to do it by region to make it cost effective and to really get an idea how it's working. And there's also a radio component, because these will read automatically. So that it'll have to be a single tower, if you will. We're going to utilize existing water towers, things like that. So we want to pick it in an area where we can put up one reader that'll pick up the pilot area.
And with that, we've been talking with the Board of Water and Light a lot. They've done this across their service area in Lansing. Orlando has been very critical in letting us see behind the curtain there. They have radio read electric meters in 87% of the homes here. There might be opportunities to collaborate with them, just putting that out there to plant that seed. We're going to have discussions in parallel.
Thank you. And then this is sort of more of organization question. So there's a lot of overlap between DPW and Parks and Rec, right? I mean, this came up in some of your discussions at Patriarch Park. And so one question I had is, why are government buildings under Parks and Rec instead of Public Works? And
I'll defer to the city manager.
okay, all right.
Since no one seems to want to take that question, historically, that has been a part of Parks, Recreation, and Arts because of the inside infrastructure work that was done, and the funding was part of that. So we can go back historically, look for some more documents for you, but that has been a part of, especially with the planning for City Hall, for the Hannah Community Center, which is very much a Parks, Recreation, and Arts facility, but we also help with the library, the fire station as well.
And I'm sure you've thought about all the optimizations that are possibly involved, and this all makes sense. It was just a question out of curiosity primarily.
Always good to ask the question and always good to keep considering, does it make sense? Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
Just real quick to add clarity, all of the park system is Parks and Rec. They're their parks. They're just our customer. We maintain everything
Right.
for Parks and Rec. So that's kind of how that works, is we're the maintenance arm of their parks.
Well, it's the people's parks and the people's DPW,
Well,
so
Exactly.
with that editorial comment. Any other questions? Okay, pardon? Does the council want to take a break and catch a bite, or? I think we want to forge ahead. I've lost, so now we're at Parks and Rec Fund, is that correct?
That is
Okay, thank you, thank you.
And thank you for the continued support of the team. The team supports the kind words. Appreciates that. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Kathy DeChambeau, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Arts and Government Buildings. In keeping with the theme of bringing a friend tonight, I have Jane Stone, our administrative coordinator, here with us tonight. Jane does the vast majority of the budget work throughout the year, amongst many other duties and responsibilities, and she keeps us on track for the budget and also helps us through this entire process. While all of our staff do a heavy lift with budget each year, person behind the scenes who's keeping everything together all year long. So I really wanted to bring her here tonight, highlight her, have her here. Yes. I know how much finance appreciates her. I know how much I truly appreciate her, and all of our staff appreciate her. So wanted to make sure we got her up to the table and could highlight and show off her unique talent in this area. So we are talking about the Parks and Recreation Fund tonight first. We've provided you with one slide. If you've sat through any of my previous two budget meetings for the Park and Recreation Department, you probably understand how painful one slide is for me, because I think I might have had 30 or so last year. So we are going to tell our story. We're going to tell our story in one slide tonight in the Parks and Recreation Fund, and then we will talk about Parks CIP with another slide, and then we'll talk about our facilities CIP work there too. So I want to
Your
just...
fund starts on page 161, I believe.
Thank you,
Yep.
161. So I wanted to start with this slide because really our story tonight starts with presenting a balanced budget with just the 2% CPI general fund allocation. This is the first budget presented post-pandemic for which we didn't need to request additional general fund allocation. And I think that that's really important to talk about. While many departments were hit hard by the pandemic, our department was hit, I think, potentially one of the hardest, because we did have to close the Hannah Community Center, because the slow rate of people coming back to those public classes, the fitness center, the aquatic center was closed for 2 years. We had huge impacts there. One of the other impacts that we cannot talk enough about was the impact to hiring contingent staff. And our department relies heavily on contingent staff, MSU students, high school students, people in the area who work for us on a seasonal basis, a contingent basis, a part-time basis, to run and to make sure that all of the programs that we offer, all the programming that we offer, runs smoothly. They're showing up every day, but we need anywhere from roughly 114 to 180 of them, depending on the time of year and the season. So coming out of the pandemic, we discovered that we were not competitive with our wage structure for those positions, and we had to make adjustments to even get applications and to fill positions and to open, for example, the Aquatic Center, our before and after school programming, all of those programs that we run. So this is something that I will come back to, but I want to make sure that we're talking about this still and sort of how important it is that we're in the place that we are right now post-pandemic. We're very pleased with it. Our proposed budget does include the use of $145,715 of our fund balance, leaving still a healthy fund balance of over $500,000, which is 8.8% of our operating costs, as a percentage of our operating costs. I want to point out before we jump into the slide, just so that there is no confusion about this whatsoever, what we're comparing here are our fiscal year 2024 year-end estimate, not the amended budget, and we're comparing it to our proposed 2025 budget. And that's what we're showing you, the difference between that. So when we look at our intergovernmental revenue, which is grant funding that comes into the Parks and Recreation Fund, and of course, grant funding fluctuates year to year. There are years when grants are there are a lot to apply for. We're granted significant amounts, and there are years when that's not the case. So I want to give the example here of how that grant funding also varies, because oftentimes these grants are state grants. The one I'm going to talk about that we currently have for our school-age childcare program is funded through the state. They have a different fiscal year than we do. So when they provide those funds to us and then the grant ends, it spans 2 fiscal years for us, only 1 fiscal year for the state. So we're always working with that within our budget as well. So I want to point out that our Michigan Department of Education out-of-school time state grant that we received here in fiscal year 2024 is for $664,000, $725,000. So this is split between fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25. So what we're showing you with the intergovernmental revenue in the slide, in that decrease between what you see in fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 is that split in the grant. The heaviest part of the grant is really in fiscal year 2024. That was our requirement to spend down those funds, and then we have about $105 left of the grant that we will receive in fiscal year 2025 and expend in fiscal year 2025. So I wanted to provide that example. The other thing that I think is really important to point out, because we are a department that does have so much grant funding tied to our budgets typically, is that when we apply for a grant, or when we know we're applying for a grant, or when we have applied for a grant, we are not putting that into our budget at that time. We're not putting that into our budget until we've actually been awarded the grant. And so in this case, that ends up being a budget amendment that has to come through, because it came through after the fiscal year 24 budget was already approved and set. And that's often what happens with us. It would be highly unusual for us to know that we're awarded a grant right now that's going to apply to fiscal year 25. So that's some of the ebb and flow that you'll see in that intergovernmental revenue as well. So moving on to charges for services, which you see are actually trending upward for our proposed budget for fiscal year 2025. These are the charges that we receive in revenue for classes, admissions, concessions, those things that we charge to the community for the programming, for the services that are rendered. And you can see that that's trending up by a good amount. Also, our rental income, which is the income that we receive coming in for the Hannah Community Center, for the rooms that are rented, the spaces that are rented, is also trending upward. We're seeing that again post-pandemic. We've been watching how the building is being used, how the participation is in the building, the number of meetings we're getting in the building, and we've seen that consistently going up, and we're really pleased with that. Going up to the point where we will be coming forward with a proposal for a space utilization study, because we need to look at how we can most efficiently use this building, and in those places where we are struggling to provide enough space, what can we do with that? And how we look at both the efficient use of the spaces that are currently modeled to be used, and the potential remodeling of the third floor and how that could be most effectively done. So we also have the money that is transferred from the general fund to our department, and again, this is the amount that is determined by finance, and it is just with the 2% CPI. That's all we are asking in this particular budget. You can see that our personnel services budget is trending upward. That is twofold. It's both the increases that happened last August across the board for many staff, full-time staff, but it is also the increases that continue to be necessary to keep our contingent staff wages competitive. And we're always looking at where we land with the wages that we're offering for lifeguards, for lead staff in our child care programs, for aides, for staff at our front desk. For all of those things, we're always looking regionally. I was recently lucky enough to be in Austin, Texas for a weekend back with my husband. We used to live there. We know the city very well. We lived there quite a long time ago. But one of the beautiful things I loved about that city were the neighborhood pools. We had lots of neighborhood pools that you could just go to. There was a small fee, so you could go to different neighborhoods and go to these pools. And while we were there, we were talking to our friends, and they were saying that those pools have not recovered since the pandemic. They cannot get staff to open them. We noticed that across the city, and of course, when I opened up the newspaper, there was an ad for looking for lifeguards, like a huge ad looking for lifeguards. We've been very fortunate, and their wage scale was much higher than even where we are. So we have been very fortunate that as we've made those adjustments, and council has approved those adjustments the last couple of years, that has helped us fill those very critical roles for our programs. And as you can see, our operating costs appear from this slide to be going down, and this tracks very closely with our Michigan Department of Education out-of-school time grant and what we have to spend in fiscal year 2024, and that increased revenue and increased expenditure, and then the way that trails off in fiscal year 2025. So that's to be expected. It's what we would look for. A little bit more about our personnel services, just to give you some additional context. We do have within, and this is just the Parks and Recreation Fund. Of course, we have other funds in our department, but within that fund, we have 14 full-time staff, 3 part-time staff, and as I mentioned, depending on the time of year, we can have from 114 to 180 contingent staff that we're responsible for. When we talk about the contingent increases, just to give you a couple of quick examples, the increase to various positions in the aquatic staff for the aquatic center, we have to hire 65 staff for that center to open and run for the season. The increase to be competitive this year is just under $1 per hour for most of those positions. For lifeguards, head guards, that kind of example. And we're talking about that increasing our personnel line by under $14,000. So, and I can give other examples if you're interested. All right. I want to point out that within your narrative, you also have a lot of information in the beginning of the narrative about our strategic priorities and how we've continued over the last several years with a set of priorities that we started with about 2.5 years ago, and we continue to provide you information on sort of how those priorities are tracking, what we've been doing, what we are working on, what we hope to work on. Happy to answer any questions about any of those or anything else that's in the narrative. Our fee schedule, of course, in the last 2 years, we brought some pretty extensive changes to you. The first in fiscal year 23, we brought the change that asked that we remove the differentiation between resident and non-resident for all our youth programming and make that just one standard fee across the board. And council did approve that. And so that's been in place for a couple years now. Last year, when we brought the fee schedule forward, one of the major components of that was to remove that differentiation between resident and non-resident adults for adult programming. And so we did do that. You approved that last year. This year, I would say that our fee schedule changes can be characterized in a couple of ways, and they're not nearly as extensive as they have been in previous years. We have some housekeeping changes, so there are some fees that never appeared on the fee schedule that we discovered that have been charged by our department, and we want to make sure that they are public and in the fee schedule, and so they've been added. We did add back in the updated combo pass for the Aquatic Center, which includes, it's a combo pass that includes a pass to the Hannah and a pass to the Aquatic Center. We ran several scenarios through the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, and this is the particular combo pass that they were really supportive of, and so that's what we've brought forward here. Also, we have some additional minor increases based on our regional comparisons that we try to make every year. So when we look at, for example, what we're paying in wages, what people are paying for various programs that are very similar to ours, and when we find that we're dropping from that mid-range to well below that mid-range, that's when we're looking to increase those fees. Also, within childcare, there are some minor increases there, and part of that is also due to the fact that with our state licensing, our ratio has changed, so we do have to have more staff hired, and that is going to increase our costs. So we did have to look at that. Happy to answer any questions about the fee schedule and about anything else that is in our proposed budget.
I do have some questions, and maybe I just don't understand some of the diagrams. And Mr. Bellman, these actually might be addressed to you. So in our big budget booklet, we have a diagram that says, it's a schematic that talks about fiscal year 2025 general fund budget, and it has expenditures by type and expenditures by function. And I'm looking at this current presentation, which, if I'm understanding it correctly, is indicating to us that your total estimated expenditures for this year in this particular category, Parks and Recreation Fund, I don't know, there's a total someplace, but in any event, so Mr. Bellman, I'm looking at this, the circle graphs, okay?
Is there a page number?
Well, I do it, yeah, my page is page 80 of the original budget document we had, but I don't know if that helps you guys or not. I'm pretty sure Mr. Bellman knows what I'm talking about. So I'm looking at expenditures by function, and Mr. Shambo, what was your total expenditures for the Parks and Recreation Fund? Is that the 442,035?
Are you asking for the proposed fiscal year 2025?
Yeah.
Total expenditures, I think, are
Under finance review is,
$5,900,000.
Okay,
Yes.
so how does
Yep.
this diagram fit into
This doesn't have all of the expenditures. This is highlights.
I get that.
Okay, okay.
But where does this little
Oh.
subset fit in terms of expenditures and function? Is this culture and recreation? Is this health, welfare, and community development?
Oh, I see what you're referring to. I'm sorry. Justin's going to help us out because it's a
Man,
finance
see,
pie
I told you.
chart.
I
Yes.
figured the other two
There's only
finance
like a
people
couple
stepped up,
people
so-
left, Justin.
Yeah,
We
it was
are
my
phoning
turn.
a-
It was my
phoning a
turn.
friend again.
You knew I was going to hit you.
These would fall under the culture and recreation function.
Okay, okay. And so your categories are going to fall under different categories in this? Is that a yes?
Whose categories? I'm sorry.
Kathy's?
This particular fund, Parks,
No, all of
Recreation, and
yours,
ours.
all of yours.
All of
Where-
ours.
Where are all of your subsets appearing?
Culture and recreation.
Yeah. I mean, there would be some in capital outlay also for
Yes.
major renovations, but it would be those two
So
primarily.
like the city hall renovation would
Correct,
be in
correct.
capital outlay?
Correct.
Okay. So generally speaking, in terms of her programmatic stuff, if it's buildings, it's probably going to be in a capital outlay thing in terms of capital investments. and
Correct.
Everything else will more or less be in culture and recreation?
Correct.
Is he speaking the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. I just wanted to try to fit it into this overall budget, that's all.
Thank you. I understand now. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Now, before you came over from DPW, did you have anything to do with facilities?
I have extensive background in facilities, just 10 years with the Lansing School District. That was my primary function.
That's
So,
what I
yes.
thought. So I think that probably was a good move
Yes.
to keep it there. Just a couple of questions. Actually, one I want to, as long as DPW is still here, I'm not sure on this capital improvement program. There's a proposal to extend the trail from the soccer complex to Coolidge Road, and there's a $504,000 project identified in the capital improvement program for this year. And I want to know, one, the source of the revenue that would pay for that, but also I'd like somebody, maybe Landon, to check out the approvals for the Beaumont, because my recollection is the developer of the Beaumont project is required as part of that project to extend that trail over to Coolidge Road.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So that's actually in our next presentation because we're doing the Parks
Okay.
Capital Improvement Plan next. I
No, I'll
can
get the answer.
answer it, or we can wait until that
ahead.
presentation, but I'm going to answer it either way. So what I can tell you is we currently have a Natural Resources Trust Fund grant, and Justin may jump up to the microphone too because he's my other friend that I brought along tonight, and he will be joining for that particular presentation. So this is Justin Dranke, and so for that, the extension, we have a $300,000 Natural Resources Trust Fund grant that was awarded to us. Of course, we also have the fees that were part of the development deals for the Beaumont and the Stratford. And then we have the easements that are required through both those developments and an additional development to get us all the way to Coolidge Road. 1/3 of that trail is also within Ingham County, and so we did apply for an Ingham County Parks and Trails millage grant for that 1/3 of that trail. We are in a holding pattern right now because we have not received the official word on that grant, but we do understand that there are some issues that they may be working through, and there are some issues that may require that that grant funding be held for a period of time, not just ours, but everyone who applied in a particular year. So our plan is to come back to council once we have a little bit more concrete information about which way we can go with this and kind of propose how we can do that funding. But without that Ingham County Trails millage funding, that's pretty significant to the project. The other part of your question, I believe, was about the Beaumont and whether that actually was in the development deal. When we first sat down to go through this project and to make the decision about whether we were going to apply for the Natural Resources Trust Fund grant, because if you recall, in 2012, Parks, Recreation, and Arts did apply for a Natural Resources Trust Fund grant for this exact trail, but those development deals were not timely, and they ended up passing on that grant at that time. They could not get everything pulled together. So even though that was 2012, we wanted to make sure that we had all of the easements in place and all of those deals in place. So we went through a process of checking all of that. At the time, we still had Tom Fehrenbach and another staff person. Landon wasn't here yet, and we went through the whole check of all of that information, and we had it documented, and we were ready to go. And so we went ahead and applied for the Natural Resources Trust Fund grant for that trail and started the process of talking publicly and going through all the approval processes about that. So we weren't expecting the Ingham County piece of this to be the part that caused us some strife, but it is right now, and so we will be coming back once we have some options to offer. But we do have that in our presentation also, and Justin can add any additional information that I may have missed.
Yeah, and let me just interject something. I just want to confirm, though, that the Beaumont approvals, the special use permit and the other approvals that we had there, did require them to construct the trail. So our $504,000 or whatever is through the soccer complex and then to Coolidge Road is.
Well, there is an amount that they agreed to.
Okay, and you don't recall what that amount is?
We,
150,000.
yes.
I've
How
got
much?
150,000 from the Beaumont and 55,000 from the villas are the records that I have.
And what, the villas are
Yes.
part of this as well? Okay, and does this most recent proposal by the villas impact anything that we would be doing in terms of extending the trail over there?
I don't believe so, but we can double check that.
Okay, I'd like to make sure that, I'd like to know that before we actually do something with it. Let me put it that way. Justin, did
Yes.
you want to add anything to that?
Just to say, we've got the 205,000 total from developer contributions. We've got $300,000 from the Natural Resources Trust Fund. The budget packet for fiscal year 25 assumes use of income tax funds and does not include any Ingham County grant revenue. But we'll be back for a conversation more about that project as we have more details.
Well, I'm excited about the project, so I was glad to see it in the CIP.
Okay, can we, let's just, for right now, let's confine questions to the Parks and Recreation Fund presentation. Any further questions on that, Mark?
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Good.
Okay, and then just want to note that I'm not a big fan of evening the fee structure for residents and non-residents. It's our residents who pay the taxes to maintain all of these amenities. So I'm just want to put that out on the table. Thank you for the combo pass. I think I've thanked you before because I think I knocked on every door that wanted a combo pass, but when it was dropped, complained about it while I was campaigning. And the repaving of the parking lots, which struck me as one of your items, that's part of facilities maintenance, right? So you are the facilities manager for us. Okay.
That's in our CIP presentation. Happy to entertain those questions too.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, anything further on Parks and Recreation Fund? Dr. Altman?
There's an arrangement where the city has a no-fee agreement with East Lansing High School for use of the soccer stadium. Why aren't we charging the school system?
So historically, that property belonged to the school district. When that was developed, that was the arrangement that was made, that could be the home base.
And then I was just going to echo Mark's comments. I'm very glad the combo pass is back. I heard some about that. Is it the same combo pass as before?
It functions in the same way for a family. It's not the same fee.
Right.
Right.
But it's
But
the
it
same.
functions, yes.
Yeah, okay, great. And then I also did hear some grumbling about the dropping the differential, because at least on its face, it looks like that's not necessarily equitable because we paid to build the facilities. But you do note in the narrative that there were some operational concerns posed by staff, and I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that and in general touch on why it makes sense from your perspective to have it the way it is.
Absolutely. So I will give you the example of the Aquatic Center. If you go to the Aquatic Center on a beautiful day and you're trying to get there right when it opens and spend the entire day there, the line can be quite extensive. Oftentimes that was a function of, a customer service associate, a CSA as we call them, and we do employ, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. These are often their first jobs. Having to check residency on someone to say, are you a resident and non-resident? It really had the function of slowing down the lines to the degree of even frustrating folks that were in line. I've spent time outside those lines, talking with folks, and we're working on other operational ways of speeding up those lines as well, but that one was really identified as an important one. I'll give another example of we get young people who come for our open gym and to play open gym, and they come over, friends from the high school or the middle school, they come over as a group, and they're standing to pay, and because one or two of them might be schools of choice, so they're not residents of East Lansing, they were being charged a different fee amongst their friends, and as they're standing there, they're having to say resident, non-resident, show that proof. Those are two examples I can give you right off the top of my head.
Okay, any other questions on this topic? Go ahead, Ms. Swanson.
This is the fee schedule. So I'm going to start with Appendix A-11. And this is the East Lansing Soccer Complex field fees. Can you help me remember, the field fee would be like if Hazlitt, is that like can you compare it to Hazlitt to East Lansing? Like if Hazlitt team was playing a game, they would be charged a non-resident fee, or can you help me understand what this means?
Do you want to take, well, yeah, because you have it open right now.
Yep. So, yes, we don't generally have Hazlitt come. They would be hosted by the home team most likely. So if they're playing this does not apply to East Lansing High School, first off. This is just club sports. So the clubs that play at our complex are the East Lansing Soccer Club and Capital City Athletics. Capital City Athletics are not East Lansing residents. The games that they play at our facility, regardless of who they're playing, are charged at the non-resident rate. The East Lansing Soccer Club, being resident club, many times play against themselves, but even if they aren't playing against an East Lansing team, they are a resident and pay a resident rate.
Mm-hmm. And is the non-resident fee comparable to our competition, which is?
Yes, and we actually just did a comparison recently on that.
Thanks, and tell us again, who's the competition?
As far as who? Like the area clubs?
Yeah.
It would be any city. With the East Lansing Soccer Club, you're talking more, regional. So you're talking Okemos, Hazlitt. It could be as far as Mason Holt. With Capital City Athletics, it's a little bit more competitive, so they can bring people down from Grand Rapids, Detroit, several areas.
Or I was saying, is it competitive to Hope Complex or?
Yes, that's one of the facilities we compare to.
Okay, all right. Tell me about the youth training, the fall training with lights. Was that something that was, go ahead.
That is relatively new. The Capital City Athletic is a very large organization, and in the fall, as you know, it gets dark earlier, so training times are smaller. We were able to allow them to use the outfields of the softball diamonds to do team training, so they could go a little later in the night. So that required use of the lights. And we found after that first year of trying it out that the electrical bill really reflected the use of those lights. So we discussed with them the fact that we felt it was fair that they pay that, they had no problem, so we've built it into the fee schedule.
And that's another thing that's comparable to, maybe Hope Complex.
Hope, well, the soccer, Our soccer complex only has lights on the stadium fields. You know, that's 2 out of the 7. And Hope has fields that are lit, so they're not charging a separate fee. They're not opening up a new complex to light those particular trainings. We're opening up a separate facility to turn on those lights. If we had lights at the soccer complex, we would have to look at rates and increase them to accommodate the utility fees.
Okay. And I'm on the next page, the stadium games, the $800.
Yes, that, a while back, we had Lansing United. I don't know if you recall, there was a professional soccer team in the area. They started using our facility for both training and games. When that was dissolved, Capital City Athletics started a lesser professional women's team, and they approached us about using our facility for the games. So that is the fee that is charged to Capital City for those women's games. They have, I want to say, 4 per season.
Thank you. Now I'm at the annual passes. What can a 4-year-old child do with their annual pass?
For
which place?
So this is, it says 6-month, and then underneath it says annual passes, and it says children 3 to 10 are charged a certain amount, and then youth 11 to 18 are charged a higher amount.
So during open swim, they can attend during open swim. They could be in the open gym with a parent.
It's weird, because the parent is paying, regardless of the age of the child. So it's weird to see the charge differences, or to think about why does it stop at age 11, and even for up to 18 years old. Are our 19-year-olds really paying for stuff on their own? Like, should they be captured possibly because it's their parents that are paying for it because they still live with their parents, et cetera, et cetera. So just throwing something out there right there. Thanks for the combo pass. I was involved in some messages too, so,
Yes.
just thanks for bringing
Yes,
that back.
absolutely. Thank you.
Tell me about the registration fees. So now I'm on page A-14, and this is the before and after school program under summer camps. So there's that $80 fee that's increased by $30. And then, I don't know if it's the same comparison, but that summer camp registration fee has been increased by $20, 30 from 20. So can you tell me about those fees?
It was actually fiscal year 2024 that fee was raised? That's not proposed for this year, it's the same?
Correct. So, all right, I'll pass, I'll move along. The next question is the farmer's market. Are those fees ones that weren't captured before, or?
So we're going to have Justin come back up because he can talk about sort of the deep dive that he and Carla, the farmer's market manager, did in these fees and the background with that information.
So what we found with the farmer's market is that the farmer's market pays for the utilities in Valley Court Park, but less than half of the vendors actually use electricity for their service. So what we did was actually separate that out from charging everybody for the utility costs, and actually are only charging the people using that. So that's why the daily rate also decreased by $10, is to basically charge the people that are using it and not charge everyone.
Thank you, that makes sense. And I just want to apologize again. This is tedious, but I do this, each budgeting session, and I'm just, again, hoping that we can lean into that when there's substantial increases on these fee schedules, that perhaps an explanation is given, because when you think about, again, percentage of increases in wages, inflation, et cetera, and then you see these huge jumps, we want to be able to justify that as well, instead of, looking at the entire fee schedule and saying, everything's all good. I was curious about the cast and crew party under miscellaneous items, and that's, I'm on A16.
Yeah. I remember correctly, hold on. I believe that was housekeeping that,
Jane has what you have. I have a cheat sheet
No, I'm
on
just-
my
but my
side,
numbers are
so
different than
she's a little faster than,
apologize, all of us express. Sorry, okay. Cast and crew. I'm sorry, I'm still. What's it listed under?
Cast and crew, $9. It wasn't there before.
Oh, yep, that's the one that was housekeeping. They have always charged the $9, but it's one of those, again, as we're going through the budget process and we're really combing through where revenue comes from, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we've never actually listed that. So that was more of a, let's get it in there because that is something that we have historically charged.
Is it per person, or how is that?
It is, it's, yes.
that was housekeeping. We did that in fiscal year 2024. That one has been there since then.
We're not charging for all pickleball things, and pickleball is just, growing and everyone's passionate about it. So why not? There's some charges where we're not taking in money for pickleball.
Are you talking about the pickleball courts at Patriot Park?
This is the sessions, so this is page A19, and this is under the primetime seniors. So they've got some programs that they pay fees for, but then the pickleball sessions and the rules and skills, there's no charges for those.
We can't really speak for that. That's part of the primetime programming. We don't set their fees.
So they create their own increases, or?
They do their own budget, yes.
Okay. And my final group is the painting and the drawing with Sharon, and then also the, in comparison to the fitness classes, because I'm asking questions under the assumption that we employ fitness instructors who have to maintain a certification. And then I'm also under the assumption that a painter or drawer doesn't have those certifications that they need to maintain to be able to offer their classes. And so it was interesting to see the differentials in costs and stuff. And so can you speak to that either separately or, or another time, or right now?
So I think we could put something together for you that would show, because I would think that this is also partly based in the number of participants that you can have in a particular class too. So we would look at that and we could put something together for you. We'd be happy to.
Thank you. Or is she new? Is painting and drawing with Sharon a new thing?
No, she's an extremely talented artist who has been in this area for quite some time, and part of that is the rate, the level of detail that you're getting, the expertise.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
One, I wanted to just flag that outside of the out-of-school time grant you received this year, I know it's a priority of a few of the departments through the My STEM network and My LEAP, that there is continuation of integration of STEM work and out-of-school time. So wanted to flag that. And then Kathy, I'm hoping you can help me recall something from our Arts Commission meetings. I know that there was a discussion of maintaining support through the city budget of $25,000. Was that in this segment of the budget or in the arts fund?
So that, I believe you're referring to the cultural arts grants. That is in the art fund. That is in that particular public art fund.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, and you should see that in there
yeah.
when you look through there.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. The
the soccer complex was purchased by the city. The aquatic center and the softball complex was on property owned by the school board.
Right.
At the time that we did that, I know there was an agreement,
Yes.
I think a joint recreational agreement that somebody can dig out, and I think that would answer your question about why the school district doesn't pay us to use those facilities.
We do have that agreement and happy to forward that to you.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Altman?
Thank you. So I was looking through the fee schedule just now, and I noticed that the fee differential also does not apply to the combo passes, right? So there's no fee differential there either
Correct.
for residents and others.
Correct.
But the operational concerns that you mentioned don't really apply to the combo passes. So could you address?
You could propose something. I do know that we did talk about that with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission as to that being an option. I'm not sure that there was strong feeling one way or the other.
Okay, so they didn't have a rationale for going to,
I think more so just that we had gone in that direction already.
I see. Okay.
If I may,
Yep.
if you buy individual passes, if you're an adult and you come here and buy a pass, and you go to the aquatic center and buy a pass, those are the same for resident, non-resident.
Yep.
So the combo pass was modeled the same way.
Right.
And a lot, if I may, a lot of what we're hearing from non-residents is that I may not pay property tax, but you're charging me income tax now. I work in the city. What am I getting? And I just wanted to put that out there,
No,
that we
that's-
do hear that a lot.
That's
that is
exactly the kind of feedback I was looking for, because I was just not seeing the whole picture. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? So it's my intent to forge ahead unless somebody on the council wants to take a break for 15 or 20 minutes. So we'll forge ahead. Parks Capital Improvement Fund.
That's on page 221 of your budget book.
I'd like to introduce Justin Blanky, who you've already spoken with this evening. Justin is our Administrative Services Coordinator, who also oversees the Summer Solstice Jazz Festival, our Community Events Division, and I have become, I enjoy referring to him now as the CIP Whisperer, and our friends in finance will know what I'm talking about because the work he does with the CIP is really outstanding, and we lean heavily on his expertise in that area, and it is something that he does very seamlessly, and so he will be able to answer questions tonight too. And we're going to tag team this. We are talking about the Parks CIP Fund. You have one slide before you with some projects. I'm going to talk through some of these. This does not represent all the projects that are in your narrative that we've talked about, but I want to kind of start by saying, due to the nature of capital improvements, the Parks Capital Improvement Fund has projects that are wrapping up after often multiple years, projects that are in various stages of progress, and projects that are just being proposed right now for the fiscal year 25 that we're looking at. So when you consider that construction for projects in parks or on trails are most often happening over the course of the warm weather months in Michigan, you can further understand how these projects easily span 2 or more fiscal years in order to get them to completion. Additionally, with these projects, we are balancing multiple funding sources, which are called out in detail in your budget, in your narrative, and some of these funds are CDBG grant funds, Ingham County Trails and Parks Millage funds, or Natural Resources Trust Fund grants, along with the parks portion of income tax. So we're just highlighting a sampling of the various stages of current and proposed projects on our particular slide here. So I think everyone is familiar with the Patriarch Park Sports Courts. We did the grand opening in June of last year. That project was just over $1 million, and we are actually just now wrapping up the final grant reporting on this project to complete in fiscal year 2024. And so that is an example of a project that spanned multiple fiscal years. Even though it's now open, we're still working through the closing out of that. Emerson Park is a great representation of several phases of projects and highlights how we've been able to utilize the CDBG grant funds over multiple cycles. So phase 1 was completed in fiscal year 2023. We started with a master plan of the park in fiscal year 2022. Started with a phase 1. Phase 2 is proposed to start this summer with a construction contract that should be coming to council on May 14th. So you'll be seeing that shortly. Phase 3 is one of the projects recommended in the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget for CDBG funding. So if that budget is approved, we would kick that last final phase off for this project or this park next year. Tamarisk Park is a good example of also starting in one fiscal year with the engineering and then preparing for the next fiscal year for construction. That park has a basketball court that needs to be reconstructed, and so we have secured the engineering for that. We've been working on that in fiscal year 2024. And then we're moving forward with construction proposed for fiscal year 2025, also with some updates to playground equipment in that park. The repaving of the parking lots is a good example of how we're learning lessons, both in how we're planning out projects, how we're utilizing income tax funds, because that is still a pretty new area of funding for us, and how we can plan years ahead in order to really utilize those funds in the best way possible. Justin and I were having a really good conversation about this afternoon, and he put it in such a succinct way that I'm going to let him take that piece of it to describe what we're talking about with parking lots right now.
Yeah, with the parking lots, it's an example of doing the engineering and design work in one fiscal year so that we can really get a better estimate of probable cost, so that when we come back to you for the budget for construction, we have a much better understanding of what that project is actually going to look like, what that cost is actually going to be. So that this is kind of an updated strategy that we're applying to several projects, which is year 1 will include the cost of design and engineering, and year 2 will come back for the cost for construction. Most often the timing works perfectly that the new fiscal year would start July 1, which is when we might be ready to mobilize and launch construction for some of those pieces.
Okay, if I can interject, so help me here, please.
Yes.
The detail we have indicates that your budget request, your budget projection is your revenues and financing source is going to be $1.351 million, and you're going to expend $1.351 million. And so my bottom line question here is, the revenues, are any of the revenues direct from taxpayers, or are they all grants from outside sources? Could you please just break that down for us so the public knows what their tax dollars are going for or not going for in this category, please?
Yeah, so for the Parks Capital Improvement Fund, we have a lot of intergovernmental grant revenue. We do get some directed community support, so that would be people making donations, right? But we do have a transfer from the income tax fund. So that would be the other financing sources on...
Okay, let me just stop you right there.
Yes.
So the income tax transfer, is that what you're calling intergovernmental revenue?
The income tax transfer shows up as other financing sources on your chart on page 222.
So for this year, you're talking about $644,195 projected from the income tax?
Correct.
Okay. And then you have intergovernmental revenue, you're projecting you're making a budget request of $270,000. Where's that money coming from?
That would be part of the $300,000 Natural Resources Trust Fund grant.
From the state?
Correct.
Okay. And then community support is contributions?
Community support is contributions. That is also where our CDBG allocations end up.
Okay. And just to segue back to our continuing discussion last year about Patriarch Park, my recollection is there was a nonprofit people that played a lot of pickleball who agreed to match a significant amount of dollars. The last time we had a discussion about that, I think it was about what I'm going to call super paving from Ohio. And I just want to follow up on that. Did that group in fact match all the money they promised on that project?
Yes.
They
Okay.
did, in fact, and they are raising more funds
Okay.
as we speak.
And so your other miscellaneous revenue in this category is from where?
So for fiscal year 25, that would be the developer contributions that have been identified for the trail extension
Okay,
project.
that Mr. Meadows was
Yes.
talking about? Okay. All right, so on this bottom line, expenditures and financing sources of $1,351,025, how much is directly attributable to taxpayers? Our taxpayers, City of East Lansing taxpayers.
That would be the income tax
tax.
funds. Yep, so that
That's
would be
all.
644.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you want to add tonight? So all these projects that you're showing us are projects that emanate from these monies, some of which come directly from our taxpayers and some of which come through grants and programs funded by the state at all, correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Dr. Altman.
Just piggybacking on that comment, I had a general issue. So my question is it possible to break out the income tax origins in a way that's maybe a little clearer? And this is across the budget, so this is not directly related to capital improvement. Is it possible to break out the contribution to the income tax in a way that makes it a little easier to determine that those contributions are coming from the income tax? Because right now they're typically listed as other financing sources in multiple places throughout the document. And I found it kind of hard to figure out the answer to the kind of question that the mayor was just asking. And this, I think, is important because people need to understand what their income tax is contributing to. And right now, it's a little hard to understand that. And I see that in some of the pie charts too, where there's a big chunk of cash that is other financing sources. And what I would like to ask is if we can identify that as the income tax.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion for the preliminary budget document. In the resolution, we do show other financing sources broken down by category. It's that much more summarized document that comes actually what you're approving for the budget, but obviously would be helpful in these discussions, so.
Mr. City Manager, I think it just seems like before we even have our public hearing, if you could prepare a document exactly as Dr. Altman suggested that gives total income tax revenue and indicates exactly where those dollars are going in terms of any expenditure by the city, whether it's pension, these kinds of projects, whatever, rather than some sort of generic category that requires all of us with college degrees to try to figure out where the money came from and where it went.
Yeah, we can provide you that, yes.
And I suspect you already have something pretty close to that, right?
When I presented last week, I had that chart. Was that not sufficient to that request?
I don't think that was as specific as what we're talking. What we'd like to do is take, I think, correct me, Eric, but I think we'd like to see where the money comes in, and then we'd like to track actual raw dollars and percentages in terms of where it's allocated throughout the budget. Okay? And I can't remember your chart, I'm sorry.
Okay, I think that's exactly what that was.
That's good. So, I'm an idiot, and you can give that to the city manager. You can give it to the city manager.
Yep.
And he can vet it and decide whether he's answering our questions or not with the data that I think you've had for 5 years.
Okay.
So, that's all. We
Yep.
just want to be able to track it. And more significantly, I think, in terms of what Mr. Meadows and Dr. Altman are concerned about down the line is, at some point, the public's going to have to vote again on this income tax. And so it's going to be a lot better for all of us if they can look back at 5, 6, or 7 years of data in a way that a person can actually read and figure out exactly where the dollars went. Because I know they've gone door to door. I know the Mayor Pro Tem's gone door to door. I haven't gone door to door in the last 2 years, but I always have people that ask me about where the damn income tax money's going and complain about it. So I think we need to broadcast that, Mr. City Manager.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr.
So,
Altman.
so this is the chart I was thinking of. This is from page 66, and it's a pie graph. And this is where it says other financing sources, 25.9%. That's a healthy chunk, right, of our budget. And I would like people to know when they look at these pie charts what that means. So it's a version of what the mayor was suggesting, but it's integrating the income tax into all the other presentations.
Yeah. I agree we do not have that, but on page 145, that's the income tax fund.
Yep.
The very last paragraph, we are saying we're transferring
Yep.
X dollars here, X dollars here, X dollars here.
Yeah, and
So that's the
that-
transfers out, but we don't show the transfers in.
And that fund was very clear, and that was very helpful, but it was all the stuff leading up to it where I was missing, okay, where is it in this mixture?
Thank you.
Could I ask one more question?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I did send an email to Robert, I think today or yesterday, with regard to this document we received from him regarding marijuana taxes. And what I want to know is what I would like to know, I guess, is our total revenue, whether it's from fees or property taxes or income taxes, whether this represents what we're receiving from the marijuana provisioning centers within the community. That was a little controversial for us in the past, and I would like to know a little better as to how much revenue we are actually receiving from whatever source of taxes into the community from those centers.
So can I say it a different way? So what you're really looking for is, to the extent we have a licensed marijuana facility, you'd like staff and the city manager to give us a breakdown of all of the revenue we get through those particular businesses, no matter what it is.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood. Thanks. Any other questions? Yeah, please.
I just want to double check a couple things. One, in relation to Henry Fine Park, I think there's also flooding in that neck of the woods that Pinecrest neighborhood has also talked about. Have we engaged the drain commissioner, or is this, I don't know if this is.
Well,
discussed?
this is partly a DPW question, but we did do a walkthrough of the park with DPW staff and some neighbors, and I don't know if Ron wants to address what they found when we were out there.
Yeah, we did just recently walk this with some of the residents in the neighborhood, and they showed us an area in the woods that's flooded, and kind of described historically what it's looked like. We have not had a chance to see if there's any drainage in the area that may have failed. I'm not aware of any, but we have not had a chance to look at that yet.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, Ron. And thank you again for going out there, because I know it's important to the residents for that engagement.
Yeah, we came away with some lists, and we've been working through some of that information, so.
Okay, are we ready to leave? Are you done? Do you want to tell us some more or not?
Well, we have facilities CIP also.
Oh, no,
and-
I know. I'm just talking
Okay.
about this particular topic.
I'm
Are you
good
guys
with parks
where
if
you
I've
wanna be?
answered all of your questions.
Okay. So facilities CIP fund.
All right, so what we did is we took all the projects we are proposing, and we categorized these projects between City Hall and Hannah Community Center under 4 areas: health and safety, equity and future growth, energy efficiency, and structural maintenance. And so that's how we thought we would talk through these. You know that we are already undergoing an elevator modernization and code compliance project with the lobby elevator at City Hall. But there is also a jail elevator that also needs to be updated. The update, now that we will have an updated fire panel at City Hall, it'll just be on the elevator side for this particular project. Just letting you know that the age of that elevator is 1989 with original electronics. So, you know, we're looking to maintain our compliance with code and to bring that up to date. So, we'll answer any questions about any of these projects, but I'm going to go through these quickly. So I have lots of information, happy to share it, but I won't go into all of it unless you ask me. There's a makeup air handler for the jail, again, original to 1989. Its projected life was 25 years. It's currently at 35 years. It really does not provide it is an inadequate fresh air exchange to current ASHRAE standards, and so that is why that is included in this project or in this list. Under equity and future growth, we have come to you last year in fiscal year 2024 to ask about converting restrooms. The current plan, we are working through the engineering right now in this fiscal year, is to convert a second floor restroom into an all-gender ADA accessible restroom, and to convert the other restroom, which could not be made ADA compliant as a restroom, to convert that into a nursing person's room, which will be ADA accessible for that function. And so that is one of the projects. And then also for the police department, the expansion of the women's locker room and to create an all-gender space that can also be used in that same way. The current locker room was constructed by combining a custodial closet and a storage file room in the basement. So it's time to work on that, and we are working through the engineering
Okay,
of
can I
that
just
piece.
interrupt you, because I'm not seeing on your slides, and again, I'm trying to help the public here. So what we're talking about now is a 5-year capital improvement fund, 6 years, I'm sorry, but you have specific budget requests for this fiscal year 2025, correct?
We're talking about the facilities capital improvement fund
Okay,
right
and
now.
is that part of the capital improvement fund?
I'm sorry, I don't know that. So your page number is going to be 217 in your
Just tell me
packet.
how much this is going to cost this year, will you, please? Right now, I just want the overall total bottom line cost for facility improvements for 2025, not the ARPA, but the facility improvements, please.
Oh, without the ARPA?
Yes,
2.214 million.
okay. And that's taxpayer money or other money or a mix?
This is a request for a transfer from the general fund for this fund.
Okay, for 2.214 million.
Correct.
All right. And thank you. I just want to know how much money we're talking about. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
So moving on to, for City Hall energy efficiency, we're talking about replacing the boiler and upgrading the building management system. In the case of the boiler, again, we're looking at an original boiler to the 1989 renovation. And the building management system is currently a hybrid system, so we have pneumatics on top of electronic digital controls, and the pneumatic controls are original, and we're looking to replace those. Moving on to structural maintenance, there are sections of roof that are required to be replaced. So we have listed A1, A2, B, C, C1, E, and F. Once those are complete, City Hall is set in terms of roof replacement for many years. So we won't be coming back to you for additional roof replacement on City Hall with these projects. These are all the roof areas that have been studied and deemed it's time to replace. Shall I keep going?
Well, let's, Are there any questions on that segment, on the facility improvements, non-ARPA? Any questions? Anybody? Please go ahead.
So we also have an air handler replacement as part of structural maintenance.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
These two units, one feeds 54B District Court, one feeds the Police Department. Again, both from 1989. 25 years is the standard life expectancy on those. So moving on to Hannah Community Center, Health and Safety. Again, we've got an elevator modernization and code compliance project here. We also, under Equity and Future Growth, have a nursing person's room that the engineering piece of that was in fiscal year 2024. Construction slated for fiscal year 2025. Energy efficiency, again, a boiler replacement. And looking to upgrade the building management system here as well. And structural maintenance, we do have replaced roof areas. And I can give more information about those roof areas. We can go into as much detail as you'd like.
Just keep
And
going,
then under
please.
the ARPA projects, the renovation of Fire Station 1 is wrapping up here with fiscal year 2024. Just wanted to mention that we are just completing some final punch list items, and that project will be complete. Also under ARPA is the replacement of the pool air handler here at the Hannah Community Center. There is a partial allotment of ARPA funding for this project. The rest is asked for out of general fund. And then a full ARPA project is the virtual meeting technology upgrades for the Hannah Community Center. I believe you know that the executive conference room upstairs is already contracted to be done. I believe we have all the equipment in, and we are looking for that window of time that that room is available so that we can get that project completed, and then looking at doing this space next and speccing that out for fiscal year 2025.
I do have a question.
Please.
About facility improvements. We had talked in passing once about the possibility of a shower and changing room in City Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of the plans?
Yep, that's part of the all-gender space that
Oh,
we're
fabulous.
creating, that they're putting, that's separate from the locker room.
Got it. So if you wanted to go out and exercise at noon and come back and clean up, you could go in that room, lock the door, and then that would be your
Correct.
space. Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Just want to confirm that when you upgrade the elevator here in Hannah, you're putting a sign in there that says G does not mean ground. Okay.
The amount of times we have to replace the label on that, it's hilarious. So, yes, we can make that more
absolutely.
clear for you.
I think something that talks to you on the monitor would
help,
be even better.
No, not that button.
Okay, any other questions for this team?
I just want to confirm the virtual meeting technology, the rooms that you've selected for the upgrades are those that are most utilized by our boards and commissions. Jane says yes from the audience. Thank you for the record.
Yes, and you'll recall that we also have the 16 mic movable system, audio system that is also been purchased, and that can be moved around to any other space. So when we do have those tight situations and we have to put someone in a different room, they will be fully mic'd, so.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Bellman?
No, I'm good.
Thank you
I think
very
we've
much
covered everything.
tonight. Thanks for
Thank
enduring
you.
us.
Justin will be staying, and I believe Annette is coming
No,
up.
I think we've.
Are we all the
I
way
think
through?
we've covered everything in Annette's plan, either through Scott or you, right? I don't think there's any further of that document. It's all been covered in the capital improvement, both on parks and.
Great, fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, unless somebody wants to stop, I'd like to move ahead with the agenda. Okay, item 6.2, DEI Training Presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I didn't read the agenda closely enough. I don't know that I have a presentation. My hope is that we would have some discussion around Council's willingness and availability to participate in a cultural education and capacity building process. I do want to just talk a little bit about what organizational change would look like when leadership is fully committed to that change. And we know that organizations who have committed themselves to be fully inclusive, anti-racist, and equitable, studies have shown that they are more productive, employees feel more engaged and valued, and it is our commitment that people would have the ability as employees of the City of East Lansing to bring their full authentic selves to work. I have been pondering the phrase of being the municipal employer of choice for our region, and part of that is creating an environment for everyone that is fully inclusive. And so what I have before this council are items for discussion with regard to what your capacity building or DEI training, I don't like using that word for human people, but what your capacity building could look like. And so it really is my hope a discussion about what your willingness is and what your availability is to participate in a process. So I am proposing that I'm making a recommendation that you participate in a process that either would consist of 5 or 10 sessions. So there would be 5 sessions at 2 hours each, or 10 sessions at, 5 sessions. I'm going to read this over again so that we can see it, because there's a typo on the slide. So I'm looking at you providing or participating in about 20 hours of DEI work. And I'm proposing that you do these in 5 sessions at 2 hours each, or 10 sessions at 2 hours each. So 5 sessions at 4 hours or 10 sessions at 2 hours. I'm going to get this right because I know how to count to 20 typically. And so my proposal is that you would cover these particular topics, what people often refer to as unconscious or implicit bias, to understand and develop traits for inclusive leadership, and a reason why we would be interested in becoming a fully equitable organization, which is finding your why in equity, the capacity to learn to lead boldly, to lean into difficult conversations, to talk about difficult subjects, to tackle difficult policy decisions as they relate to equity and inclusion. To normalizing equity. We think that that's an easy thing, but it often isn't. And sometimes how we normalize talking about equity is hidden. We have provided for all of the departments a budget equity primer, which gives them an opportunity to look at how they are asking for you to approve resource allocations based on a model of equity for our community. So also talking about creating safe places and inclusive spaces for people who work within our city organization and for our community, and then also looking at the role of government in creating equity. And for me, that's a big one for this body. We often will look at government and its ability to do great things, to be helpful to communities, to build communities, and we have the capacity to do great, make great advancements. We also have the capacity to do great harm when we don't pay attention to the communities that we serve, and we make decisions about putting highways through thriving communities, or not paying attention to how we are allocating budget dollars for certain communities. So this is a potential capacity building formula that I'm proposing that we have a discussion about tonight. And so that's my short presentation.
Mr. Bellman, do you want to speak to this?
What would you like me to speak to? Well,
I'm here for a budget discussion, and so I have in front of me a budget for diversity, equity, inclusion, organizational culture, which is requesting total expenditures of $248,935. So where are you in terms of the budget on this, and what are these services going to be, I guess is my question.
So some of the budget that you just referenced also supports the East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission as well as the Human Rights Commission. But Elaine can speak to specifically dollars in her budget that she has set aside to do some of these trainings, and whether she's able to do it, whether we rely on the state or other providers of services to talk about the topics that she has presented. So
Well, is this operating costs? Is that the outside services?
So I'm not sure what you're asking me, but the budget is comprised of our, what it costs to manage our department. The lion's share of the budget that you probably are looking at is through what we will refer to as contract services,
Which
or
is
which is operating costs
Okay.
for capacity building for staff. And that can range from anywhere from training and certification to us hosting our monthly lunch and learns to bringing in facilitators and the whole
Okay.
shot.
And so your figure that you've got in here, this is your figure, right? This 221,095?
It is my figure.
Okay, so that's your estimate on what this would cost in terms of outside services? And the next part of this question is, does that include the ongoing services that our regular employees are going through? Is that
Yes.
part of that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have an estimate for us on what this city council component would cost?
Well, I do. I actually built it in, but it would really kind of depend on what the city council's pleasure is with regard to how they wanted to approach the capacity building. If there is a willingness to follow this model, to go through the capacity building over several months, then that figure is around $22,000. And that's bringing in outside facilitators and materials and taking you through a full process.
Okay, other questions?
Well, I'm happy if I don't mind. I think I've already commented on this in an email I sent, but I really feel as though I support all of the things that you've identified here in terms of session topics. But I believe that, and I know that there might be some maybe union contract issues in terms of requiring all of our employees to participate in this type of training. But I don't think we have that same problem with regard to our directors and our upper level management. And I believe that the city council should not be identified as the group that will be getting this information, but that we should be part of the group that will be getting this training, and that it should be citywide, government-wide. And I would be very happy to participate with our other employees in this type of training, because I think that would be valuable for council to have that experience as well and get the feedback from not just the 5 of us, but also from all of the other employees who are in upper level management within the organization. So I'd like to see this bigger, frankly, and that we be part of it. I don't know that it would be 5 sessions at 2 hours each. I don't know how that would be arranged at all, but I think it's important that this be done. I just think that having it just for city council, that just doesn't do it for me. I think it should be us also participating with the other employees in this training.
So I will say that our staff is offered a variety, or will be offered a variety of capacity building. I will tell you that as a practitioner, and recognizing the type of conversations that take place in sessions like this, having council participate with staff might stifle staff's opportunity to be fully transparent in those circumstances. You doing it with your colleagues is an entirely different matter. So I think that there's some ways in which council can interact with staff going through this process, participating in the lunch and learns that staff are doing, participating in unconscious bias training with staff. But I really do think that there are some unique benefits in you as a policy-making team going through a process yourself with the city manager, because it will help, I believe, build community among the council, and also it would be your unique process. So we have had a a 10-month opportunity to really watch how staff engaged with cultural education and capacity building. This organization made a significant investment in allowing staff the opportunity to participate in 40 hours of DEI training. And while some staff took advantage of it and took the whole 40 hours, some didn't. But the benefit that we saw with staff being able to come together in community with each other was, it was unheralded. It's when we went, and we have been going around to departments talking about the work that we're embarking on for this coming fiscal year. One of the main things that we heard from staff is that aside from the content of the material, the thing that they enjoyed most was being with each other, having an opportunity to interface with staff that they ordinarily wouldn't have an opportunity to do that during the course of their regular work. So I think that there's some value in both approaches, but I would strongly recommend that council participate in a process with just council.
Ms. Watson?
Explain to me. Hold on, Super. Sorry, I am fasting. And I was wondering what time Kroger closed, and that is what I was looking up, because I can get Jell-O that I do not have at home. I'm sorry, but I do have, I do have questions. My first, I can't remember what my first question was, but I will go into the previous council. As the epidemic was hitting, we were going through a DEI process. And so we were going through a training together, just the 5 of us, along with the city manager. And myself, I recently attended a training that was 2.5 days. So that means 2 8-hour days plus 5. People that attended with me were Edgewood Church people, actually, and Marshall School District. If anyone's familiar with Marshall Schools, they merged in the past few years with Albion Community, which is a predominantly Black community, and just trying to, again, provide a quality education to everyone, no matter what they look like, was clearly of value to them, because they drove to Lansing and stayed so that they could attend this training, as well as State Department people were also with me as well. I just always jump on the opportunity, and I'm biased. My title during the day is Health Equity and Social Justice Coordinator, and so some of my job duties is to actually put on implicit bias training, as well as we used to offer these health equity social justice workshops that were 3.5 days. So again, that's 24 hours plus half the day, 29 hours, and it's of value to, not just go through a training one time, but I'm always picking up something new when I go to the trainings. I didn't want to think about taking a DEI training with you all, because I am the only Black person. And we've received, as council, we've received criticism on how we're coming off to the community, or how people are coming off as racist. And I think it's important, even if you didn't specifically, even if you don't specifically see it, that you show the community that you want to try, and that you want to learn something new or possibly different. And that we can become comfortable. There's just a few council members to this date, since November, that have had the courage to talk about race or racism during our public meetings. And that's part of when we talk about white supremacy and decentering whiteness. Part of it is part of the ideology is that we're afraid to talk about race, or that we say the race is the problem when the racism is what the problem is. And so I think until we become real solid in our communications and our understandings, that it's important that we show the community that that we're in this, and we're trying our best in it. And that's all for now.
Well, having said that, I'm curious, because I think you have more professional experience on this than any of us have. So is the county, have the county commissioners gone through a similar program?
That's a really-
And can you define
so.
what,
Yeah.
quantify some of the
Yeah.
programs you've experienced,
Yeah,
please?
that's a really good question. So, no, not as a whole that I know of. But on our Racial Equity Task Force, which is comprised of about 5 Ingham County commissioners, we entertained the possibility of going through implicit bias trainings together or doing some work together. And again, it was a good conversation where it's the Racial Equity Task Force, so the assumption is the commissioners are with it, but really we have our own biases just always to work on. So I would say in that small group, like they were part of it, but our commissioners have, a lot of them have been with us as we've declared racism as a public health crisis and hired our first DEI director, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I don't think
All
that.
right, so you, even that little subgroup hasn't gone through a specific training. It
That's
hasn't
correct.
bid it out. How about the health department? Have
Oh,
you
yeah.
guys, well,
Yeah.
so talk us through the quantification of the programs that the health department's done, external programs, if there have been external programs.
So, since I'm here, we don't have to have external programs, since I'm
Okay,
here.
well, that's
And
the-
so,
that was my
but
question.
I am putting in money to have a support person, like a co-facilitator that gets paid to do these dialogues with me. But our dream at Ingham County Health Department is that all health department employees go through these implicit bias trainings because, again, we're servants to the community. And we don't want, from our environmental health to our nurses who are maybe working one-on-one or people who come through the clinic to be having bias and cause that ongoing problem of people not wanting to work with them or not looking forward to seeing them. And so just,
Right,
yeah.
so this program, I'm not picking on you, but that's
That's
your,
all right, I
that's
don't
your
mind.
profession,
Yeah.
regardless of what race you are.
Yeah.
So this program you went through with Marshall and Albion and all those people, who did that program? What was the external
So this was
purveyor?
an outside group called Erase. Erase is a group that Elaine's met and that we met through our Racial Equity Task Force. And so, and our DEI director recommended to me that I attend one of their trainings. And so they put on a structural racism training, and that was what I took and gained great knowledge. And Erase recently was primarily in Kalamazoo, and they've recently are here more in Lansing to provide that training.
And how about the State Civil Rights Department? Do they have an outreach along these lines?
So yes, so I don't know what the name of the group is, but along with Michigan Public Health Institute, they have given us a list of trainings that are available for people to take, whether they're 8-hour training or a 2-hour training that people can go to.
And does Michigan Public Health Institute have its own training?
Yeah, it's in conjunction with them because they have shared contracts and dollars and
And
stuff.
do you have all that information?
I do. I
Okay.
do. I'm
All right.
familiar with very familiar with Erase. I've participated in Erase training with some state agencies that I worked with. I'm familiar with the work that MPHI does around racial equity and social justice, and with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights.
Okay, so what I'm trying to figure out here is, we're talking about a budget item that's buried in this big issue. But I'm trying to figure out, so you gave us the sheet for tonight. We have a budget document from before, but so where do these recommendations come from? I mean, are all of these, I think I would like to know about the specific programs that are offered, just like I'd like to know about who the potential contractors are for a sewer project and everything else, not to equate the two, but we're going to spend some dollars here, and I frankly, if somebody's asking me to sit through 10 sessions of 2 hours each, I want to know who's doing it and what I'm committing to, because I ain't going to commit unless I think it's something that's going to be good. I'm not contesting that it's good, but I want to know what I'm committing to. And so I guess what I really feel, Ms. Hardy, is conceptually, the way, this is a discussion only, conceptually, yeah, I'm with Mark and Dana, and I think all of us would like to do something like this, and I think most of us don't want to have some, superior position to our non-union employees or anything like that. But I'd like to sort of know what the territory is in terms of all the people who are offering these services and stuff.
So typically, what we did the last time when we went out, when we took council through a process, is that we put an RFP out. We took those responses to the RFP, and I have convened since 2020 a executive work group that works to advise and provide feedback for me as we roll out any kind of DEI work. That executive work group looked at and vetted those proposals and chose an organization to take council and staff through a process. And so that would be much the same process that I would do. Part of the discussion is, what the council's willingness is in terms of time. So if it's, if council is saying, yes, I'll give you 5 months and I'll give you 2 hours over those 5 months, then that gives me some way to craft an RFP, craft a request for people to bring us some information. Council says, nope, I'm going to do this one time, you got 2 hours, then that's a whole different conversation. So that's what I was hoping for.
I'd like to think I'm not quite that kind of a troglodyte, but I guess I'd like to see what some of these proposals are. I understand you have to craft an RFP, but I'd kind of like to see what some of these proposals are in terms of what they think they can do in a certain number of hours, and maybe they'll have a 4-hour program and an 8-hour program, and maybe I can read a book or whatever. Anyway, discussion.
Me too.
I just want to, share the short answer to your questions. Yes, willing, as we've talked about in prior discussion meetings, in terms of being a part of I'm trying to think of your capacity building on this front. And then my only question is, if we're going through it as a group, do we have to notice it to the public?
So not for trainings is what I understood. So if it's a training, then you didn't have to.
I'm not sure.
So the last time we took council through a process, we received an opinion that because it was training, we didn't have to. That could change, I guess, but the last time
we'll be revisiting that opinion.
I think if I may. So right now, what Ms. Hardy and I are doing is we're going out to every employee through meetings. And we've done probably 12 to date where we've gone to departments. So going back to Councilmember Meadows, your point, we're not making any of this training required of any of our employees. I didn't think it was fair for you to require me and your goals to get 100% participation and then require every employee to do it and say, I've achieved that. I want them to want to be in the room. I want them to embrace. So the topic that we are rolling out right now is implicit bias or unconscious bias, and we've identified Vernee Myers as a leading expert in this area. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other local individuals, either through MSU, that could do also some implicit bias training, but Vernee has an online program that would cost the city, for about 300 and some employees to participate, about $25,000. We're also evaluating whether bringing Vernee in person for 2 one-hour sessions and some additional book signing and that stuff, right around $60,000. So it's something I would look at. You could join the workforce in that type of session.
Yes.
You could be right in the same room listening to that presentation, or you can get online and do the same thing. The thing that we miss is that talk back after you hear it is, what do you take away from it? How does that improve? How does that benefit us as a group? What I think we could go down the session topics that Ms. Hardy has provided you is put some additional clarity as to what's the goal of us with that topic, what's involved. And then look at who could ultimately provide. Maybe it's somebody in-house. Maybe it's somebody through MSU. Maybe it's somebody through a third party to come in, and what's that cost? We have some limited resources in the DEI budget. We have to be very conscious of how we leverage those dollars to get the best return for not only council, but for the organization, to advance our commitment to being a very inclusive organization. Because I look at diversity, I look at equity as encompassing of being inclusive. Because if we're inclusive, we're addressing all those issues. But it is something that requires more than a one and done.
Yes.
It's a conversation on implicit bias that happens, and maybe it's multiple presenters, because what hits me may hit you differently, or have that aha moment. So we can bring back some additional information to these various session topics and who locally or would be the most advantageous to present. Because we have some resources that are sitting across the street that could be very valuable to this process. Elaine could probably facilitate some. I don't know if Councilmember Watson would be interested in facilitating some of these discussions as she does it for her job. Could be beneficial for all of us.
Well, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, so I'm on a workforce development team in my day job. And one of the questions when we talk about offering trainings is like, is our purpose to say, you know, people took the training, or to ensure like they're connected to the training? And that's that online, like some opportunities that are provided, an employee can just click through it and not really absorb it the way that you can when you're sharing a space together. And speaking of sharing a space, when we go through these type of trainings, there is always a rule on confidentiality. And so in order for us to get to a place where we understand that we're not coming in this space to be comfortable, and that it's okay to be uncomfortable, we need to have the confidentiality there. So I just encourage you to figure out how council managed to do it on their own the previous time, because it's really sensitive, the things that come out, and it's better to do that more privately. And they're typically facilitated dialogues. And so like as a facilitator or a co-facilitator, I have the ability to check the room and see who's checking out, whether they're showing it through their phone activity or they're not talking as much, and to think about, how am I creating a space for if they're introverted or extroverted, where they can be a part of the conversation and not check out as easily. And so it's like, it's not described as presentations that happens during these times, but a facilitated dialogue, because we just have a deep history that's embedded in inequities and created in ways so that certain groups absolutely achieve and other groups do not. And that takes a lot of looking at and digging into to kind of get to a place.
Dr. Altman, do you have anything you want to add?
Briefly, just two comments. I think we should do the same programs as staff does. I don't think we should be singling ourselves out. I think that's the equitable approach. Either we can have difficult conversations together, even if there's power differentials between people. Either we can have those difficult conversations or not. So I would like to see us do what is also available to staff. 20 hours is unrealistic, in my view. We're volunteers, we have day jobs. I think if I had an extra 20 hours to spend, I would want to look at other ways to receive training. I think that I could learn a lot about municipal accounting in 20 hours and sharpen my oversight of the city budget, having spent a couple of days reading through the city budget. So I think there's some context missing there as part of this discussion. Those are my comments.
Go ahead,
I just have a question. Robert, you mentioned that we would be missing the discussion that might come afterwards if we were to participate with the rest of the employees in say this implicit bias, and we brought Renee in for $60,000. Are you saying that there is no discussion or questioning or
No.
interaction with the audience that takes place? And just one other item there is that if we are, I can't imagine us having this without notifying the public that it was taking place. But if we were part of a much larger group, I think then we wouldn't notice as an open meeting. That would be a training exercise that would be a little different. If we have the 5 of us in a room, even though it's training, the discussion that might ensue, I think, triggers the Open Meetings Act, and we have to, and you can check with Tony on that, but I think that would be a bigger issue for us.
So let me see if I can summarize the discussion to what the next step would be. So my sense of the discussion, with all due respect to each of you, is yes, the council wants to engage in this at a level that's significant and substantive. And secondly, we're not really prepared to make a affirmative commitment tonight in a discussion-only item. So I guess I would suggest that the city manager and the DEI director get together, given the discussion you've heard so far tonight, and come back to us with a plan or some plans, proposals involving possible purveyors of the services, external, Michigan State, wherever. Now, that's my summary. Does anybody disagree with that? Ms. Watson, do you disagree with that?
I don't disagree with your summary. I have more things I have something to say.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to see if we can move this forward after tonight.
Can I add one other point, if I may?
Sure.
And maybe Councilmember Watson or Ms. Hardy can address. How do you define success or impact with this training? Because I'd like to be able to quantify that too, if it's quantifiable with the material that we bring back to you.
Well, that's a 600-year question in this country.
I appreciate that, Mayor.
So
Yeah,
you can spend a lot of time trying to define that, but
Yeah.
this is a built-in problem, and so somehow thinking that we're going to solve anything by going through this so that there's a, quote, success, I question whether that's reasonable. Maybe the conclusion in the end is, you can't be totally successful. So go ahead,
You
Dina.
can't say that again. You can't what?
You can't be totally successful.
And when I think about the organization that I work with, I've been with the health department since 2009. It brought me great comfort that we offered these health equity and social justice workshops. It gave me a sense of belonging. And so then, later in my career, I became our health equity and social justice coordinator. So part of me is knowing that some people, colleagues, feel better knowing that we offer this and that we're trying to address it within our organization and be better servants and just better people in our lives. And it opens my eyes up to, I talk about health in all policies, which is equity in all policies. And I just encourage, the narrative and the policies and everything was created for white, cisgender males to be successful. And I just encourage you all to just especially as you speak on what you think of it, the system's always been set up for you all to be successful. But what does it look like, or what are you missing? What have you missed this whole time in your bodies and in your skin that you could learn alongside us to do better for the community as a whole, and not just understand if you're leaning too much into doing good for just the community that looks like yourselves. And so I like that you guys are talking about walking into the space. and attending some workshops. I know the value of us going through it together. And yeah, I had feelings about whether or not I wanted to go through it with you all or not, because there were times in our health equity spaces where it was re-traumatizing for Black and brown people. And we've made a point and an effort to understand that experience. And I know that whoever the facilitator would be, that they wouldn't do that to the people of color, whether it's within our organization or, for me personally, if I were to be in this shared space with you all and things come up where I'm like, you didn't know about that? You didn't see that? You never saw that statistic and how that feels. But anyway, this is a great discussion.
I would just like to add that the way I read our human relations ordinance and state laws, we also have to have sensitivity to to women and the disabled, among other groups. There's a lot of different groups, and so I think at a certain level, this discussion in East Lansing is centered on race for good reasons. That's good. It's a good discussion, and it's good to disagree and stuff. But there are other categories here that I think are very important in terms of our sensitivity to different groups and people. So if I go ahead.
I was just I want to thank Councilwoman Watson for, sharing her last comments and recognize that I think the opportunity that this holds, it would be great if we could put a timeline of what you summarized, Mayor, to the city manager and Director Hardy to come up with some opportunities that we can formally adopt within a period of time so we can move forward. I think it's important. It's an important discussion. It's an important opportunity that we, figure out how we can move together forward.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Altman.
I wanted to echo the city manager's call for a definition of success or some focus on the specific problems we're trying to solve. I think recognizing that it's a 600-year-old problem, in my mind, makes it even more important that we try to figure out which part of it we're going to carve off here. So I think that was a relevant goal, and I would like to support that comment.
Okay. Do you have enough guidance to proceed?
I believe so.
Ms. Hardy?
I do so.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Altman, second by Watson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thanks, staff, for being here. Appreciate it.